up, see what that's about. We can go around in circles trying to find us out, but if you're looking for the truth, you got to find it out. NASA can't go to space, so we hit the roof. Get it, hit the roof, and it all came to light with 200 proofs. Now I'm just really sick of people lying to me. So when I tell the truth, don't come crying to me. Pick up the phone, get on the line with me. Line with me. Who you gon' call? Who you gon' call?
And welcome everybody to Globebusters. Black Sun, 2 suns in the sky confirmed. I am your host, Bob Xanadude60, and we are back with another great show for you today. Today's going to be a good one. We have some really great people that have joined the panel. Many of you know him. Don't even need to introduce him to most of you, but we will anyway. But today we're going to be talking about some very, very interesting footage that has emerged that was shot by a gentleman by the name of Crrow 777, actually a while back, and it was shared, kind of went viral all over YouTube and everything, and people are really talking about it quite a bit. So there was a lot of speculation on it, and then we had another gentleman that was able to capture the very same thing, our very own Chris Van Matre. So we're going to be looking at that footage today and talking about it and a whole lot of other things. But I promise you it'll be an interesting show, to say the least. So before we get to that, let's go ahead and introduce our co-host and the posse. First up, we have Jaron from Jaronism. How you doing today, Jaron?
Doing great, Bob. Great weather here in California. It's like 70 degrees. We're getting up there now. Summer's coming right around the corner. So awesome and excited to have the guys on the show. Everybody, as always, you know, John and Iru, but very special to have 2 guys that I've listened to for a long time. I think their podcast is one of the best on the internet, you know, really, at least as far as I've heard. And if people have podcasts they think compare, I would love to have those links sent to me, because I'm talking about, of course, Crrow and Jason. So it's awesome to have them on. Just watched their movie last night, and unbelievable. I'm going to get out there and can't wait to start filming some of this stuff myself. So it's awesome to have them on, and wanted to also welcome them both to True Frequency Radio. I've been there for 3 years. I think it's a great platform, and I'm so excited when I hear new people coming on board to have radio shows there, especially when you're talking about the caliber of people in regards to Jason and Crrow. So it's going to be awesome to have them on the show, and can't wait to hear it out. Let's go.
All right. Beautiful. Okay. So yeah, it's a beautiful day here in Denver also. And I don't think they're chem spraying yet, but who knows? That seems to be kind of a daily thing these days, but for now it's a beautiful day. So I'm just going to appreciate it for what it is. So next up, I'm not seeing John the Morgile in yet. He was here a minute ago, but then his internet crashed. So, you know, that's the way that goes. So we will go ahead and introduce our other co-host, Iru Landucci. How you doing today, Iru?
Hello, Bob. Hello, everyone. Nice to be here. I'm really excited too. I'm a really fan of the Crrow channel, so I'm trying to get myself calm down. No, like Jaron. He's very exciting. I can notice that. No, but really, I'm really hope there will be a great show.
Absolutely.
Am I overly excited?
A little bit. You know, I when you start to spoke, I believe maybe you must have some kind of football team or something like that. You are very, you know, strong words.
No, I could care less about football. But anyway.
Okay, you know, you can have some kind of crowd to, you know, give that energy.
All right. I'll calm down. I'll relax.
Excellent. So yeah, glad to have you back, Hero. You've kind of been taking some time off to be with your girlfriend, and you have turned into quite the celebrity down in the South American television stations as of recent.
Yeah, we have here, you know, I mentioned before, but we have really success with the sorry, my head. These 3 weeks that I didn't spoke English with anybody, so my brain start to, but no, we have here the conference in a province here in Argentina, and the media pick up that news and, help us to spread the word. Of course, they trying to ridiculize and, the usual thing. But here in South America becomes a really hot topic, the flat Earth, and we are part of that. So we have a really nice trolling the media here.
Beautiful. And yeah, and I'm sure you're doing a great job. I wish I spoke Spanish so I could, kind of peer in on that stuff. But I do know that you've been all over the media down there, television stations, radio, pretty much everywhere. So, great job, sir. Absolutely great job.
Thank you.
All right. So next up, we have our very own deep inside the rabbit hole, David Weiss. How you doing today, David? What's going on in Connecticut?
Doing great. It was a beautiful day, but the chem planes have obliterated the sky, and I'm thrilled to be inside. I was worried that it was going to be a blue sky day, first warm day, and I would be inside, on Globebusters. But now there's no reason to be outside. So. Besides that, all is super good. I'm excited for the show. Lots to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. There is. All right, cool. And so next up, we have Jason Lindgren. And of course, many of you may know that if you've been listening to the Crrow 777 podcast, Jason is kind of the co-host and Crrow's partner there, does some fabulous work. And Jason just recently finished his movie, which premiered yesterday or day before? Friday. Yeah, it was Friday. Called Shoot the Moon. And I got a chance to watch it on Friday night. Actually, I've watched it twice now. And I got to tell you, Jason, really great job. Awesome work on it. So welcome, Jason.
Thank you. I really appreciate that and the kind words on the film. I really didn't know exactly how it was going to go over, but both Crrow and myself put our heart and soul into it.
Yeah, I can see that. And I have to tell you, that opening scene when you had the first shot of the moon that was in 4K. Now, I don't have a 4K monitor. I just have a 1080. It's like a 56-inch, 1080 TV. But it was so dazzling, that first shot of the moon. Absolutely incredible. It just makes me wonder what it looked like in 4K. But just beautiful shot. So, all right.
Well, I was trying my best to do something to capture everyone's attention, like, what's this about? What have we got going on? This is really interesting. So hopefully I accomplished that.
Well, you certainly did in this house, that's for sure. My wife and I were just in awe of that first shot. In fact, we sat there and we paused it, and we're amazed at the depth that you could see of everything going on with it. So let me go ahead and bring that up, by the way. And I'm going to play the trailer to it here shortly, but first I want to go ahead and introduce Crrow, our guest of honor. And Crrow, I have listened to you for a long time. I am a member of your podcast, and I was actually turned on to you by our friend David Weiss, and I started to listen to it, and I absolutely love the material that you cover. You run the gamut with everything in there, and it's just a fascinating podcast, and we're in awe. We stand in awe of your work. You do beautiful work. So welcome so much to Globebusters, sir.
All right, man. Thanks for having me. And maybe we can make a little history today. I think it's maybe possible, and I don't say that very often.
Yeah, I think so. So, okay. So first of all, let me go ahead and I guess what I want to do is I want to just play the Shoot the Moon trailer, if that's okay with everybody. Kind of give you guys an idea of what you're working with and what you have been doing. And then we'll go ahead and just kind of launch into talking about it. So let's go ahead and launch that. It's only a 2-minute trailer, but let's run with that. Here we go, guys.
Crrow 777 presents Shoot the Moon. Available now on Vimeo On Demand.
all started in 2012 when I shot the first lunar wave. I filmed for 4 years straight, nearly went broke, but it's astonishing the things that I filmed, and it's even more astonishing what's happened since then.
Yes, indeed. All right. Very, very nice. Okay. And you know what? Before we go any further, my goodness, Chris, I forgot about Chris. I feel so bad. I'm sorry, Chris. We also have with us today a returning guest that has been with us several times. And he's a good friend of mine, even though you'd never know it because I just completely spaced him out. It's your fault, Chris, because you're the picture in the middle of the screen and I was going across the top of the Skype. So anyway, so we have with us Chris Van Matre. And how you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing great. Yeah, beautiful weather here in Denver, and I'll concur. Excellent movie, Crrow and Jason. I watched it last night.
Thank you. It's good to have you here too, Chris. I think between the two of us, if I'm even in the right ballpark, we're about to change the view of the world in a big way.
Yes, I'm excited. I'm still in awe over everything that's taken place this week.
Yeah. And I guess not if YouTube has anything to say about it. I just noticed that already this show has the little info box just appeared below the show, the Apollo Space Program info box. So for people who need to be told what is true and need to be told what is factual, they have the info box. You can click over and go to Wikipedia and learn all about the Apollo Space Program and the fact that we haven't been back in 50 years. So I think that's very interesting to start.
I'm lucky because here in South America we don't have that promotions from the government. We don't approve that yet.
You don't approve that message?
No.
To put a fine point on it, I don't see that. I wouldn't have known if you hadn't have said. So you can see what they're doing.
Crow, you have to refresh. If you refresh the browser.
I did.
Mine just popped up.
I'm logged in and I refreshed. I'm not seeing it, but I'm logged in as me. Maybe if I unlogged.
Very interesting.
Yep. Oh, I see it. I just refreshed. There it is. Apollo Space Program. Those guys. Unbelievable. All right.
That's certainly cool. You put Crow's anywhere in the description, you're going to get that, I guess.
And I'd just like to make one quick statement to everybody out there. Please, everybody out there, if you have questions about what I have filmed, please don't go to anybody else's social media sites and be rude to them and leave comments and questions. Please direct all your comments and questions to me.
Yes. Yeah, go directly to the source. That's always the best policy, I think. So anyway, okay, so also for those of you that are interested in seeing the Shoot the Moon movie, it is on Vimeo. The link is in the show description. As I said, I watched it on Friday. Jaron watched it. I'm pretty sure Chris has watched it. A lot of people have watched it. And it's really, really excellent. It's just slightly over 2 hours. And I would highly recommend it. It's definitely worth it. Oh, and by the way, we have John the Morgal that just joined us. Hey, John, how you doing, man?
Hey, guys. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
We hear you just fine, sir.
All right. Great.
Okay. So,
hey, Bob, I just want to throw one thing in on the movie. A lot of people don't realize this. If you have a smart TV or Apple TV, you can download the Vimeo app. I think it's on most of them, and watch it there. So it's one of those movies that you shouldn't watch on your iPhone while you're driving, because it's a lot of small details. So if you can get it up on a big screen, it just makes it that much better.
Yeah,
absolutely. I watched it on my big screen last night, and Bob, I thought it was interesting that you said that you watched it twice, because that's the first thing I started thinking is that I have to go back and watch this again. I let it play through as if it were a movie the first time, but some of that footage, I can't wait to really zoom in on some of that stuff. It's going to be amazing, and it makes me want to go out and film the moon myself, shoot the moon.
Yeah,
I've actually been seeing comments already on our Facebook groups. People are interested in if they only have a little bit of money at P900, they have a little more at P1000. If they've got a little more, they're asking about what scopes to get. So I think Crrow and I will have to address that again on this week's podcast, because people are having great conversations already with the film only being out for 2 days about, oh my God, this is amazing. I want to do this too. So it's great to see that people are getting inspired already.
Yeah. Well, it really is interesting, and I've seen some of these objects myself. I think I told you in my email, Crrow, that I've got a 10-inch Meade LX200 with the AutoStar 2 system on it, and I don't use it as much as I used to, but I used to be out there almost nightly with it. It was crazy, and we have seen some really interesting things, kind of going across the moon. I've never caught a lunar wave, but we've caught little objects that appeared to have been orbiting the moon, which was really strange. And of course, this was before, I got into this flat Earth stuff, a few years ago, and I was still very much believing that, the moon was a physical place and things like that. And I was reading some things where online conspiracy things that said, Mars's moon Phobos left its orbit and came and started orbiting our moon. And it was so funny because I drug out the telescope, started looking, and sure enough, there's an object that appeared to be going around the moon. So I was absolutely dumbfounded. I still don't know what that is to this day that we saw, but it's just crazy, all the stuff that you see out there in so-called space.
If it was a lot of work to do this movie, and not only that, a lot of expense, and that sets aside thousands of hours of filming, all the equipment upgrades I did long before we ever thought about doing this. But if lots of people decide they want to go out and get into this and start looking up and filming, then for me that made it all worthwhile, because it's about time that people start getting a truer idea of where we are. And every day they're kicking that can. We're going to Mars. We're, just last night, a friend of mine sent me Israel's going to the moon, and look, here's their orbiter on the dark side of the moon. I said, yeah, right. I grabbed the image, took 15 seconds to adjust levels, and sent it back to him. And I said, it's not science to take faked images and, shape a worldview. It's all fake, all of it. And so people need to start to understand where it is we exist. And when you begin to understand where you exist, you have a better idea of what's possible and where you can go from here.
Crrow, I'm surprised you even adjusted the image. You just look at it and it's fake.
Well, I'm talking to someone who's buying into this. So, I use the levels to show them this is just a constructed image. It's a snapshot of nothing. Just to make my point, I didn't need to. I don't even need to adjust images anymore because I know nothing goes to space.
Right.
Or what's called space.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure space is a place.
Well, maybe it's a good descriptor, they're talking about the space between your ears. That's really where space exists.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Go ahead, Jaron.
No, I just say absolutely.
Yeah. I was going to say that, even if space doesn't exist, even if it's like a biblical cosmology or something, like there's a firmament and the stars are in it, we don't know, but we're pretty certain that nobody's ever gone to space. But, you have to wonder if it is as described, like biblically, and there's a firmament and there's waters up there and stuff. You have to kind of wonder what's on the other side of all that. But that's something that is absolutely pure speculation on anybody's part. The only thing that we can kind of glean from the information that we've done by looking and observation and also watching NASA in their fakery is that, they're not going to space. The stars don't appear to be these suns, thermonuclear reactions out there. And in fact, the nice thing about it is even mainstream physics, especially the people over at the Electric Universe or the Thunderbolts Project, are absolutely tearing the idea of the standard cosmology apart in favor of an electric universe. And whether or not it is in a enclosed type of firmament or whatever, it does appear to be electrical phenomenon because it matches very well with what they've been able to replicate in plasma physics. And of course, when you get footage like what you and Chris have shot, Crrow, it just kind of goes to reaffirm that in my mind.
Well, there's one force here. It's electricity. That's it. It's what we got here. And if you look at all the things we build here, you'll quickly understand that is the force. Nukes are a lie. We've proven it. Anyone who wants to dig in will discover that Marie Curie is a made-up personage, and she's the one credited with it. But to get back to the point, the daughter of electricity is magnetism. Now we're talking about the moon. But what Chris and I have shot here, this is early. We don't even know what to call it. We're pretty sure, we start calling it the second sun, but we just have to have language to discuss it. But from my point of view, I think it's extremely possible, quite possible, that what's going on here is the world consciousness has lifted enough, and now we can detect whatever this is. If it is, in fact, the source for the sun and moon we see, then it's a bit more like, I say a lot, nobody leaves this place, not with their body. This is the reason we're tuned here. So there's this other thing beyond that we can't get to in our current condition, and it will begin to shed light on these things. But people listen to what I'm saying, and they probably go, what the hell is he talking about? But think about this. So way back, whenever you want to pick a spot in time, when people were dependent on looking at the sky, understanding when the equinoxes come to plant and everything else that was required to live in this world without technology. These people knew the sky better than anyone probably living right now. They studied it and studied it and studied it. They built ideas of astrology. They built ideas of astronomy. They described every body they could see. But in describing those bodies, they did not describe Neptune or Uranus. How can that be? How can that be? In some of the old texts, the statements that have been made is that when human consciousness raises, then that's why we could finally detect Uranus and Neptune. And not only that, the claim is there's more luminaries out there, but we have to ascend. Our consciousness has to rise. So right now, my main ideas and the thing I'm wondering about most, have we reached a level that's allowing us to detect this other object now? That's what I'm thinking about.
Well,
All this talk about electricity all the time, I'm really wondering, does anyone keep in touch with Eric Dollard anymore? I know he's a little on the crazy side, but I think he may have put the chime in here if we could get a conversation going with him.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that.
Someone just posted a clip like 2 or 3 days ago. Someone just posted a new clip with Dollard live.
Yeah, I saw that. I followed Dollard for quite a while, but I think, one clip in particular that I think Jason may be talking about is this particular one, the famous one where Eric Dollard is in his car and he's talking about the sun is not any thermonuclear reaction. He says it's some sort of a converter. They don't really know what it is. It has all these very strange properties. And of course, for those of you who do not know who Eric Dollard is, he's an electrical engineer that was commissioned by I believe it was the Sonoma State University and financed by RCA to study the sun back around 1980, I believe, when we were having incredibly high solar flux and solar activity. And of course, this was also about the time that Mount St. Helens blew off. And the information that he came forward with after that basically did not sit too well with the powers that be. And they, now he's living in his car, to make a long story short.
Yeah, and there is also a really nice interview I have downloaded and post-produced. He's in a park with two guys, I believe that are like musicians, guys. I don't know it's about 40 minutes, the complete interview, and it's really amazing. I don't know if anybody here see that clip, but I really recommend it.
Beautiful. Yeah, you can actually, if you want, throw it in the Skype chat, and I'll throw it in the show notes. So
yeah, of course.
And we'll go from there. So yeah, I mean, Eric Dollard talks about it. Eric Dollard also talks about oh geez, I forgot what I was going to say. He also talks about, a variety of other things, but he says that you cannot see the stars when you get out into space. And he also says, and I don't know if I agree with you can't see the sun. He does say that you can't see the sun when you get out into space, but he does absolutely say that you can't see the stars. And of course, that's been confirmed by several of the astronauts. Lots of people, even insiders from NASA, have said that. And that was kind of the aim of one of our projects that we launched a balloon a couple of years ago that unfortunately was lost. But the idea behind it that we wanted to confirm was whether or not you could see the stars when a balloon got high enough. Fortunately, some other group of people did do that, and they got it up to about 90,000 feet. And even though you could still see the stars at 90,000 feet, you could see a marked reduction in their brightness, which I thought was incredibly interesting. So it would be interesting to see if we can get something up to like 120,000 feet or so to see just how much more the stars fade out. And of course, if that happens, then that completely eliminates the idea of the stars or even the sun, of course, being these thermonuclear reactions, out in deep space that we're able to see supposedly millions of light years away, which of course, none of us have ever really bought in the first place.
So
the only time I can remember. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say some of that makes perfect sense. It's the idea that I was just talking about with this second sun or whatever it is that we're filming. For light to bounce off an object, you have to have 3D material world. You have to have material, right? So if you get up to another level that is not bound by the 3D material rules, it makes perfect sense that light wouldn't bounce off them because there's not material in the same way there's here. And this is part of the idea of nobody leaves this place. You're tuned, your body and everything here is tuned to this environment. When you grow up or whatever the rules are of this game and you get beyond that, you go to the next place. A lot of people have written about this through the history of our world. And I think that's an intriguing idea that Dollard put forth. And it makes perfect sense to me having read some of the very old alchemy texts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the only time I remember ever seeing the stars from high altitude balloon footage was one particular video where they had some kind of a diffraction lens or a specialized lens specifically to pick up these like a meteor shower at night. But I've watched probably hundreds of different high altitude weather balloon footage, and I don't remember ever seeing any stars in them from the 120,000 feet.
Yeah, exactly. And there's another guy, I think his name is Peter Lindgren. I think that's right. Also talked about the fact that you couldn't see the stars up in space. And these are, of course, PhD scientists that are studying this. And, like I said, when Eric Dollard came out and talked about it, that was it for him. Boy, they just washed him right out of the academic community, which is really a shame. But, I tend to agree with a lot of the stuff that you say, Crrow. And even though, I would agree that a lot of this stuff goes into the realm of philosophy, I still think that there's a lot of truth to it, because of I don't know, I guess you can just kind of come to those conclusions through a logical inference, if you will. But you've got to think outside of the box in trying to figure out exactly what this place is that we're living in, because Lord knows the powers that be are never going to be honest with us.
Well, without a philosophical way like alchemy provided, you have a rigid way, is what science provides. And it's not going to get you there. Science will not recognize a thing that can't be weighed, measured, seen, filmed, whatever. And there's more to this world than that. And that's why there were hermetic philosophies, alchemical philosophies, and philosophies are not rigid. They fit the person that's using it, and they fit the situation the person is trying to logically deduce. And I can give a prime example of this. After a lot of study, I've come to the conclusion that the reason we got the globe model was because of Galileo. Whether he was a real person or not, he was a double agent for the church. What Galileo did was built off Copernicus, put this thing forward, and the Pope said, "Oh my God, you can't do that. You're going against Scripture. We're going to put you to death." "Well, we're not going to put you to death. We're going to jail you." "Well, we're not going to jail you, but you can't leave your house. And by the way, your book is heresy. But anyhow, you can publish your book." In less than 100 years, the Jesuit order, which is the military and science wing of the Vatican, were spewing what Galileo put out. But here's the real key. So we're told that they all became astronomers in the Vatican and in Europe, having forgotten apparently what they call medieval people knew, what they call the Dark Ages, which were not dark at all. And they start looking because they need to place Easter. All right, that's their big thing. They're going to redo every damn calendar. They claim Julius Caesar did it, but it wasn't good enough. So they're going to go through all this effort to remake calendars so that the Pope can dictate this day is Easter for everybody in this world. Think about what we know about equinoxes now. They are wholly dependent on where you are. The first equinox we will have in the United States will be for those people in the northern part. The vernal equinox was the 17th. You go down to about midway in the country, it's a day later. You go down to the farthest tips in the south of this country, it's a day later. provably equinoxes are based on geography. So what the church tried to do was insert their globe nonsense, their spinning everything nonsense that a guy named Galileo, who either existed or didn't, was the source of. By the way, playing the name game, right? It's a total Jesus link to name someone Galilee. But to get back to the point here, so there has never been a time in the history of human beings until the modern time when cultures didn't know when the vernal equinox was. They celebrated it. They set holidays. They got ready to plant. They knew when the vernal equinox was. The church wanted to place Easter the first Sunday after the first full moon after the vernal equinox, and that's when they set out to make their fake calendars to back up their fake globe idea, and it is all provable nonsense. And that's the source of what we're all doing here now.
And I'd like to point out to anybody who seems to think that this might be absolutely ridiculous, the Roman Empire never fell. It became the Catholic Church. The Vatican discovered, once it became the Vatican, that it's easier to rule through subterfuge and information than it is with boots.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I agree with that 100%.
It's a bit of a rant, but the equinoxes are a key thing. And while the solstices seem to be a bit more firmly locked, I'll drop another hot potato here. I don't think years are static. I think each year is different in length, and that was part of the problem. But here's the real kick in the crotch. The Vatican comes along to say, okay, now we all got to be astronomers. As a matter of fact, the year 1620, if there was such a time, is the basis for the technical age. The Pope says to all his priests, if you're not a computer, you can't be a priest, because we all need to know astronomy. So people who could do math well were called computers, just to be clear. So anyhow, yeah, man, I lost my thread here. They were shit. Pardon my French.
Jesuits, 1600s.
I lost my thread. I'll think of it in a minute, but there's a key point to why they were.
You were pointing out how the priesthood pushed the concept of that you had to be a computer and the calculations, and that's how they switched the models over and got everyone.
Oh yeah. I remember what I was going to say. So all these guys are going to get into astronomy again. By the way, Judaism always knew how to do the astronomy. What they're saying is the people in the Dark Ages, I don't know why they call it the Dark Ages, because it wasn't. They made cathedrals in those times that nobody can replicate. They made armor for knights that nobody can replicate. Stained glass windows that nobody can still to this day replicate. Point is, the church goes back to Ptolemy, all right? All the way back to Ptolemy, who's saying, this is a plane. Here's all the things that we know right now about astrology and astronomy. That's where the church forms its basis. Then along the way, after they learn what people who had a plane model and a real model of the sky above our heads, they bring up this Galileo nonsense. In less than 100 years, they shift over that. But the whole time, they were sourcing the Almagest by Ptolemy. And that's what this channel we're talking on is based on. So it goes to show you what's happened. And you can rest it all firmly on Rome, whatever Rome was that became the Vatican, and their nonsense calendars, and Easter. Easter is the cause for all of our nonsense calendars, the lies about the equinox, the globe model, all of it can be tied to Easter. And I'm here to tell you, it is such a simple thing to recognize the day of the equinox, wait for the first full moon, and say next Sunday is it. It's not that difficult.
By the way, the technology that Crrow's referring to from the Dark Ages, Middle Ages, whatever you call it, that's all based on alchemy. There's your proof that alchemy is the real science, not the modern scientism.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to back up a little bit, Crrow, and let's kind of get into your footage that you shot. And I want to kind of preface this by letting people know that you started out by, photographing or videoing the moon with your telescope. I believe you said you had an 8-inch Meade, and then you got a Canon camera and started shooting footage of it. And you, of course, are most noted for the lunar wave. So give us a little background on how that all came about.
So in 2012, there was a supermoon, and I had not been using my scope regularly. I was going to have one of my nephews over, my brother-in-law, so we busted out the scope to look at the supermoon. That night, we saw all these black objects transiting the moon for hours, like 2 or 3 hours. Even some in formation my brother-in-law reported he saw. And we were looking through an eyepiece. There is no sharper view of the sky. I can't possibly deliver with my cameras as sharp a view as a 26 millimeter eyepiece will give you looking at the moon. And that's what got me going. So I said, you know what? I'm getting the things tomorrow, which I did, to start coupling camera to scope. So fast forward, let's see, that was May of 2012. By the time September came around, and actually it was a true equinox day. They reported it later, but the night that I filmed the first lunar wave was actually an equinox. I knew it somehow. I knew it was related to an equinox for a long time, but I just didn't know how to demonstrate anything, or even I didn't know how to describe an equinox yet, because that's been lied about. But as fate would have it, I was sitting out there looking at the 3-inch LCD window trying to film things transiting the moon, and the wave went. I didn't notice it when it started. As I panned the camera down, I pan up, the wave catches it, and I did what everyone else does. Some technical thing must be failing. Almost deleted the clip. That would have been a drag, because had I done that, it would have been gone. But that's how the 2012 clip came to be, and it took me weeks to realize that this is not, technical malfunction. This is provably a filmed event because of the camera pan.
Crrow, there's something I want you to address that's really, really important. And that's the notion that this is not caused by airplanes, because I'm seeing it all over the place again, even on discussions on our own social media pages. How can you explain accurately to dismiss this concept that airplanes are causing this?
Well, for one thing, I've filmed, I don't even know how many. You saw all the footage, Jason. I filmed a lot of planes of different sizes transiting the moon. But to be clear, when I filmed the 2012 wave, I didn't realize. The next time I filmed a wave, I always keep binoculars out by my scope when I'm viewing. It's impossible for it to be an airplane, because you can see them and hear them. And when you're sitting out there for hours and you see one or hear one coming close, you try to film it. And I have tons of footage that proves that you try to film it. Talk to anyone who sits out there for hours filming. If they see a plane, they try to capture it. But it's been filmed 30 times, and one guy claims he can prove it's a plane. On one footage, he shows the plane, and there's like a weak wave, a single, not a double. And on the other one, there's a relatively strong double wave, but there's no plane in frame. And that's the reason the guy named Brennan has been out telling everybody that it's filmed by planes. But it doesn't make any difference to me. Richard 205 Maria is the only person that I'm aware of that's filmed it more than I have. He filmed it 6 times. That man has at least as many thousands of hours of scope time as I do, and he says no planes. There it is. If it was caused by something flying, it would have to be 100% silent, 100% invisible, or moving so damn fast you couldn't possibly see it or hear it, which I think is unlikely.
Well, I have now gone through your footage over and over and over again on a 5K monitor. I have very good equipment in my studio, and it just doesn't look the same. Sure, there are similarities, and I have no problem admitting that, but maybe what these people are seeing were caused by planes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all lunar waves are caused by planes.
There's footage out there called lunar waves, which I don't really accept are the same thing as what I call a lunar wave. But here's something. Anyone who wants to go look in this can go check. There's a piece of footage on YouTube where they wanted to film what's called a bow wave on a jet going supersonic. So they filmed it in front of the sun. And what you will notice is a supersonic jet forms a bow wave on every single surface. So in that footage, if I remember correctly, I think it produces 5 waves that really don't look identical. It does make a wave, but it doesn't look the same. It makes one from the nose cone. It makes one from the leading edge of each wing. It makes another couple from the leading edge of each tail wing, and then the upright tail fin also creates a wave. You can go look that up to see what it looks like, a bow wave being created by a plane going supersonic in front of the sun. And you can see the differences. And the problem becomes is someone saw the footage a long time ago, they see the other footage and they start to say, yep, planes do it. I would urge you to go back and look at the 2012 lunar wave, and you will see It's not the same thing. But not only that, in the 2012 wave, there's motion going in three directions. The wave is going basically north and south. There's a sweep that would go like east to west, and then there's a diagonal thing that goes on. So that's another thing that tells you a plane going in a single direction could not create waves going in three directions.
Crrow, also when you see the lunar wave go, it's consistent and it's displacing everything below it the entire length of the moon. When you watch a plane go by, it makes a wake. It looks in the same category, but then it just spreads out. It doesn't maintain and move. So for anyone thinking that it's a plane, I would say it's impossible that it's a plane.
Well, there's another thing to think about. I'll just throw it in before I hand it back to you. And in the last episode Jason and I did on Crrow 777 Radio, we once again brought up a thing called wisdom of the crowd. The lunar wave is a perfect example of a form of wisdom of the crowd. This thing went worldwide. So many minds said, wow, what is that? And that tells you something of truth. When something goes that far across that many minds, there's a there, I would just add.
I wonder, do you guys have a hypothesis or thoughts as to whether this is like the moon itself somehow warping, or maybe it's just some sort of a natural wave in the upper layers of the atmosphere? Or do you guys even have any sort of thoughts as to what this is? It's very interesting for sure, but how could we test it? How could we, form some type of an experiment to discern whether this is actually the moon warping, or if it's just some sort of a perturbance or waves in the upper layers of the atmosphere?
I suspect this goes on. It may relate to what I call the hard, fast barrier. The Bible calls it the firmament. Other people call it the dome. Whatever the barrier is up there, maybe it relates to that, but it is not peculiar to the moon. And the proof is it's been shot twice in front of Jupiter. But both of those are amazing pieces of footage, because Jupiter is tiny compared to the moon. So you would think a wave like you saw on the moon would go over it so quick you'd be lucky to see it, but that's not what happens. People can go look up the wave going across Jupiter. I suspect any sufficient luminary in our, whatever the heck you want to call it, firmament, barrier, whatever, people choose to think about it. I think anything with a sufficient light source behind it, including the sun, could pick this up. But I'll tell you, there were times early on when I put out calls to all my followers, call the observatories in your area and get them to give input. One observatory, I think it was Norway, it was in a country like Norway, if it wasn't Norway, gave a terse one-sentence response saying it was clearly atmosphere. And that should tell you something else, too. If I can film this, how come NASA has never said, look, there's turbulent waves in the atmosphere, and because NASA has telescopes on the moon 24/7. When I started calling them out saying the moon has not changed in my lifetime, how can that be? How come nothing's hit it? Within 3 weeks of me making that clip, they released what they called 4K video, which was black and white and crappy, of a little white dot showing up on the moon, and they said, look, something hit the moon. It's all ludicrous, all of it.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, I think that the fact that it comes in pairs is super indicative of what we are seeing, and the key to realizing that what we're not seeing is jet impact or waves.
Key point.
Yeah.
Yeah, key point. And people go out and look at the jet going supersonic in front of the sun. A lunar wave, as far as I know, is always two waves. And a good lunar wave, a strong lunar wave, will displace, like you're looking through a glass of water. Like if you see what we call a crater, when the wave goes by, go look at the 2012 footage, it will displace the crater. And then the second wave comes. So basically, the whole image of the moon is being displaced twice as both of the two waves go by. And that's a good point, John. But again, people go look up the supersonic plane in front of the moon, and you'll see that every single surface on a plane that's going fast enough will create what's called a bow wave.
Right. And additionally, beyond that, aircraft, when they are going, when they're flying, they fly based on a principle called the Bernoulli principle, or the Bernoulli effect. And basically, this creates vortexual air currents. Okay. So when you look at the lunar wave footage, what you're actually seeing is you're seeing this like linear line that's going up uniformly, perfectly across the face of the moon. Now, a jet either going supersonic or just flying by with the standard, vortex coming off the wings and the tail section would not generate that perfect of a linear line right across the moon. It would never happen that way.
Good point. In the 2012 wave, I seek to show there's a slight bow in the wave as you see it. The problem becomes is part of that just optical illusion in your brain thinking that the surface of the moon we see is like, a ball, half a ball. So it's a difficult thing to prove, but if you scrutinize, see right now you're seeing one set of those waves going in a different direction, slightly diagonal and curved. See how they're curved?
Mm-hmm.
An airplane can't make a curved bow wave. They're perfectly straight. And I urge people to look at bow wave footage to see. But the waves themselves, what we're calling the lunar wave, see there's the sweep. Right there, there's the horizontal sweep left to right. And then the wave starts. But the wave to me has always looked slightly bowed. And it's a hard thing to prove. And this was a crappy camera. It was only 16 megapixels, Canon T2i. But I filmed it with 36. But this footage to me still stands above the rest for some reason. So there's flat lines laid in to try to demonstrate that there's a slight bow to that. And I would point out to anyone, if it could be proven that these are slightly bowed, there's no way in hell anyone could ever say that it's a bow wave of some kind. Just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Curvature.
You
found
there it is. There's your curve. We've identified the curve. It's on the moon.
Yep. All right. So, okay.
I thought, just one more thing. I thought it was interesting that Crrow said that he notices a change from NASA as soon as he comes out and says something. They're definitely listening. And I think it was about a month ago, and I'd have to look it up, but I did see NASA come out and say, "Oh, we have now supersonic shock waves that are, colliding in flight in front of the moon." Or I think it was probably early March or something that I saw that. So it's indicative that you're definitely over the target. Something you say immediately changes what they do.
Think about this. They just pulled the moon back into our atmosphere, didn't they?
Right.
There's the barn wall and Animal Farm. In another 20 years, no one's ever going to remember that we were told the moon was over 250,000 miles away. They're reeling it back in. Right now, they just pulled it back into our atmosphere, but they went ahead and told you that our atmosphere goes up 250,000 miles plus.
Right.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, it is a fascinating thing. And, of course, if space, we've kind of thrown around the idea that, maybe there is more truth written in Scripture than people might think, in that, when it talks about separating the waters above from the waters below, maybe space is liquid. I mean, we've certainly seen some very interesting footage that would kind of indicate that, if not liquid, then possibly fluid. Iru has come up with some ideas about sodium hexafluoride. Is that right, Iru?
Yeah. Yes. SF6, the abbreviation.
Yeah, SF6. So, and there's been demonstrations on it. So I don't think that space is, just this empty void or anything like that. I think that, obviously we've been lied to about that as well. And if it is indeed some sort of a fluid or liquid, then all of these findings would make a whole lot of sense to me.
Well,
in fact, I don't know if you saw the interview. There is around 60 with a professor. I believe he's an astrophysicist or something like that.
Yes.
That one. Yeah. That one you are
This
showing.
man tells the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, why don't we listen to this really quick before we go forward? Because this gentleman is talking about, this was before any of the Apollo moonshots, and he goes on record, and he's sticking to his guns too. He's speaking very confidently, saying, no, the information that we have now is all but conclusive, that the moon is some sort of a plasma phenomenon. And of course, that's what, modern day scientists and people in the physicists in the Thunderbolts Project are concluding about the sun also, is it's some sort of a plasma type effect. So let's give this a listen really quick to hear what he says in case the viewers haven't heard this. Here we go.
He tells
you
the
have
truth.
a theory about the moon, and we expect to be able to get observable facts about the moon fairly soon. What is your theory? Well, it is by now rather more than a theory. 10 or 11 years ago, I stated to various scientists that the moon is not a piece of rock, but it is a plasma phenomenon, cosmic plasma, and that this fact will eventually be confirmed. I made certain predictions which were already confirmed in 1958, and the situation now is coming close to a complete confirmation.
What will be the result if you're proved to be correct in your theories?
The result will be profound and decisive, because it will give proof that a complete reinvestigation of the laws of nature is necessary. Because if the moon is a plasma, no man will ever land on it. The soft landing attempts will all fail. That means that the mass of the moon is less, far less than is currently assumed. It's in a different state of energy, and it has far less mass. That means there is no more explanation for the tides. If the moon, for example, had only 1,000th part of its current mass, then the tides would only be 2 inches high under conventional theories instead of sometimes 14 feet. And that means that if it is proved that the moon is a plasma, then all gravitational theories are out, and a new concept of the cosmos and of its laws has to be evolved.
Aren't you being a bit adventurous, though, because you know that we're going to be able to test out your theories on the moon fairly soon?
Well, not anymore. 11 years ago, of course, it was rather taking a risk. I was considered a lunatic, of course. But by now, the evidence, accumulated evidence, is already so much in my favor that I'm not taking any risks anymore. On the contrary, there is scientific views expressed all over the world now that the moon seems to be of a quite different nature of what was assumed.
But the Americans and Russians are thinking of landing men on it.
Well, that will never happen. Not on the moon. On Mars, on Venus, and other planets, yes. But the moon is definitely, as I assert, a plasma.
That is great. And yeah, so this guy, Professor R. Foster, it's interesting because you can now no longer really find anything on him anymore. They've essentially buried him and his work. What a surprise, right?
That's what happens in the modern age. But I would add another thing. You guys are kind of like the core of the movement here. You have a massive audience, and you're kind of like the center hub. So I would ask each of you, how many of you feel like the 2012 lunar wave influenced you to be a part of the flat Earth movement starting roughly 30 days after that was first posted?
Well, to be honest, Crrow, I had not even heard of it at that point in time. So I would have to say that for me personally, it didn't have any effect on it at all. I came to, the flat Earth idea through studying NASA and trying to understand why everything they did seemed to be fake. But, when I saw your footage, I have to tell you, it only reinforced a lot of the things that I was already beginning to suspect.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I think that the moon is key. And so anybody who starts, this line of research ends up on the moon, because the moon is so important. Because once you recognize that man has not been to the moon, then any rational mind starts to think and peel away, truth's protective layers. Why lie for this long? Why lie in the first place? And then you realize, again, even if you believe in the globe and the sphere, if you believe in that program, then you start to realize that no human has been further than 300 miles. And that's, again, if you believe in the space travel and the space program. So then you start to question the entire narrative, and then you recognize that big lies can be told, and not just told, but perpetuated, basically, easily. And once you realize that we were all taught at such a young age that the only option was to adopt it as a belief. And Crrow has said many times that belief is the enemy of knowing. And so growing up thinking that people have traveled to the moon, and you look up at the moon and you say, oh, men have been there and they've landed on that sphere and stood sideways on it, and that it pulled them to the middle. This mass belief, where belief is now celebrated and basically demanded, right? I mean, all children must pass standardized tests to prove their adherence or their alliance with this belief system. So once you understand how powerful the moon or the Apollo hoax is, and how literally it shaped the world, both literally and metaphorically, only then can you start to see the deception and the purpose of NASA. So I think it's all, it's just a progress. You have to kind of go through the steps. And I think too often we might not remember that the moon is so key, that people need to understand and recognize what the moon landings did and what they continue to do, and the fact that we can't do it again. And it shaped the world, literally. So
You know, I don't remember whether I was reading Velikovsky or some other thing, but people should be aware that the moon plays zero role in solar eclipses, zero role, provably zero role, and it plays zero role in the tides down here. And people say, well, how does it work? I wish I could answer that. But there were some very smart men. It might be covered in some of the Velikovsky work. I just don't remember, but you'll recognize the quote. A famous cliche quote that was developed out of someone trying to prove that the moon had direct influence over the tides of the world said this: it's where reason goes to die. So you've heard that before, and that's why you've heard it, because he came to understand scientifically you cannot tie the moons to the tides.
Yeah.
And, you know, in response to the 2012 question, you know, all I can say about that is I don't know if it had anything to do with this lunar wave, but I do remember specifically being, 50% sure, or let me put it this way. I wouldn't have been surprised if the world was going to end on December 21st, 2012, because of all that hoopla about the, the Mayan long count calendar and how that ended or reset on that date. And isn't it interesting, though, that there was within a pretty close time span of that date, just this massive awakening to flat Earth and new interest in the cosmos and all of this stuff. But, you know, you said the moon doesn't have anything to do with lunar solar eclipses, right?
Right.
You know what? I'm not sure if I agree with that. I mean, I've seen some evidence to suggest that the moon could have something to do or could be transiting the sun during solar eclipses, but maybe if we have time, you could elaborate on that.
Sure, but I would ask, what evidence have you seen that you've considered?
Well, you know, if you look at the moon's trajectory, we know where it's supposed to be, even though, you know, you can't see it when there's no moon phase. Based on my limited understanding of astronomy, we know that the moon should be about where it's transiting the sun during the eclipse, right?
Well, yes, and you pointed out the key to that, new moon. Why do we call it a new moon? Isn't it the same old moon that's always been there? Why do we call it a new moon? And I've said for many, many years that a young moon or a new moon is completely see-through. There is some evidence out there to support it, but here's the deal. So as I was scoping my head off for these years, quite a few lunar eclipses and Venus transits and solar eclipses happened. During this time, I was sun gazing. And when I got to the point where I could stare straight into the sun for an extended period of time, I started to get a whole different idea of what's going on here. But I set out to do one simple thing, and I set out to do it with a damn good 36 megapixel camera, a long throw telephoto lens with a doubler, an 8-inch telescope, an 11-inch telescope, a full spectrum camera, and a solar H-alpha telescope. And I set out to do one single thing. I reasoned that if we're told the moon is just over 250,000 miles away from us, 340 or whatever people want to call it, they always argue about it, just let's say more than 250,000 miles away, and they're telling us the sun is 93 million, then that means when the moon is moving to cover the sun, which is a miracle in itself that it's the perfect size to cover the sun, by the way, you should be able to detect it, because it's only 250,000 miles away roughly, and it's backlit by the brightest thing we know, 93 million miles away. You cannot detect the sun. It cannot be done. Now, NASA claims there's these special eclipses when you can detect it, but again, they don't have the evidence to back that statement. But here's the thing. I used light obliteration. I used full spectrum. I used any trick overexposing, underexposing. You cannot detect the moon before it gets to the sun, as it takes the bite out of the edge of the sun, as it covers the sun, as it totally covers the sun, as it exits the sun, as it's free of the sun. At no time can you detect the moon with these tools. And so by the time the 2017 came around, I was ready all day long. And not only that, I did sun gazing during the middle of that eclipse. It wasn't total where I was, but I stared straight into the sun for over a minute, and it is a whole other thing going on a normal.
You didn't go blind.
Well, I'm trained up a little bit. Yeah, people don't just go stare at the sun unless you know what you're doing. You've got to start and train yourself. It's a bit like giving a baby a jalapeno. Don't do it. But
And,
anyhow, when you
I-
stare it into the sun on just a normal sunrise day, it energizes you. It's calming. It's serene. During a solar eclipse, it is like complete chaos. It looks like every photon of light is ricocheting, and it's just complete chaos as this goes on. But my point is, by the time the 2017 happened, I announced it, and I'll stand behind it to the day I drop. You cannot detect the moon. And lo and behold, there's an older culture, a very old culture, that told you the truth, probably with Ketu and Rahu. It's the nodes that cause every eclipse, and that includes lunar eclipses. Lunar eclipses and solar eclipses are caused, as far as I know right now, by Ketu and Rahu, and this has been known for millennia.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely not going to purport that the moon and sun are the distances that the heliocentric model claims. Like, no way. I'm not even going to say necessarily that the sun and the moon are physical objects. I tend to lean towards them being plasma or something even more exotic. But just physically speaking, and again, this was my main point, that we can track the moon rather, through the sky. And when the new moon phase happens, whatever you want to call it, when there's no, moon lit, we know where it should be in that trajectory, because it follows a set course every day.
Well,
and if it's
let me add something there. If you use something like Stellarium, you're taking someone else's word for it. We have people in my forum that watched what Stellarium did, and then they went out and they started calculating it for themselves, and they said it's in the vicinity, but it's not right in front of it. But I would point out another thing that solar eclipses prove to us. And by the way, this has been scrubbed from the internet. It is no longer easy to look up that the sun is an infinite light source. I spent roughly 10 years when I got out of the Marine Corps as a stagehand, a freelance stagehand. Part of that was working with very high-end lighting people who do lights for the Rolling Stones and other world-famous bands. So I learned a lot about lighting. The sun is in fact an infinite light source, even though online now Google has taken it upon themselves to make that difficult to discover. An infinite light source is different than, say, a spotlight. If I put a spotlight on a human being and I move the spotlight closer to them, their shadow will grow. Everybody knows this to be true who's ever been on a stage. An infinite light source is different. Doesn't matter where you put the light, the shadow will remain the size of the object casting the shadow, and that's what the sun is. And since during the last eclipse they told us the shadow was 70 or 72 miles or something like that, it tells us certainly that the object that covered the sun, whatever it is roughly 70 some miles wide.
Well, and I agree. I agree with you there. I would just say there were a few times where the shadow of whatever object was transiting the sun during a total solar eclipse was like, I think, 2 miles in diameter. So I would say that whatever that smallest number is of that shadow's diameter, then that would be the closest approximation to that object's diameter.
Right, but you've got you've got to be careful though, because NASA plays the cone game with shadows. They'll tell you about penumbras and umbras and all these other things. It's all scientific mumbo jumbo, and you've got to understand something about reality from firsthand observation to begin to dissect what they're putting in front of you. They would have you believe that when a light source is behind the moon, the darkest part of the shadow comes to a cone point.
Right. Well, and a point that I've made several times is that the whole umbra penumbra theory or whatever totally debunks or falsifies Eratosthenes' method to estimate the circumference of the Earth, right? Because in order for that to work, you have to have the sunlight coming towards the Earth at perfectly parallel angles to one another. Yet, in order to get this bizarre, peculiar pinpointer shadow of the moon, as they say, you have to have the opposite of that. You have to have the sunlight, right, diverging on itself and then converging and diverging, whatever. But yeah, no, I'm definitely not going to sit here and stick up for the Ball Earth apologetics for reality. I would say that the fact that there have been a couple of instances where the shadow of the totality during a solar eclipse was like, I think, 2 or 3 miles in diameter. I think that may be actually closer to the actual size of that object, if it is an object.
Hard
That's
to
all I
know,
was-
but I would point out one thing. There is nothing new under the sun. And before Rome and the Vatican had its way with us, there were cultures that knew. And anyone who's interested should look at Vedic astrology, which is some of the oldest cultures going, supported by Sanskrit, which is apparently one of the most complex languages ever put forward. And maybe you could compare it to, a lot of people will tell you, if you're an engineer, German is the best language to speak for engineering. Sanskrit probably was many times what modern languages are in terms of complexity and what could be communicated. But those guys, they understood and they wrote about it.
Yeah. Ira, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
No, I just wonder what the old civilization thinks about the lunar eclipse and the sun eclipse, in particular the sun eclipse, and Crrow answered very well.
Well, I would be very surprised if the whole Quetzalcoatl idea, the culture, whatever culture that was, and the people who live there know better than what we hear in the United States, certainly. They probably have versions. You know, they talk about a dragon swallowing the sun. That sounds a lot like Ketu and Rahu, because one of those is called the head of the dragon. The other one is called the tail of the dragon. So I would suggest, you know, it's a bit like when you hear accounts of Rome. Oh, well, look, there's a temple to Jupiter. Well, what's Jupiter? It's a god. No, it's not. What that temple was to an aspect of nature. It was a different variance of kind of how alchemy and natural science goes at things. They give not personification, but a way to describe a certain aspect of nature so they can pay homage to it. And all it's doing is trying to describe things that happen in our world. You know, Jupiter and Saturn and Zeus, these are not gods. These are aspects of nature. We've been misinformed, and that's also confirmed through old alchemical texts.
Yep, absolutely.
I completely agree. Yeah.
And of course, there's this footage also, which I've always found very interesting, that I think was captured by QNFI, where we see these objects that are very near the sun, that were photographed during an eclipse. Out of a plane window, and they are not spots on the window. In fact, you can put circles around them, and they stay right with the sun, whereas the spots on the window are actually moving all around. It's not this particular clip. I don't think that they did that. Maybe it is. I just kind of pulled this one up. But it appears that there are absolutely objects out there. And, you know, I've said for a long time, it seems to me that these are the quote-unquote mythical Rahu and Ketu that are obstructing the sun. And in addition to that, I'd also like to say that back in 2017, we also went to, Chris and I went to Alliance, Nebraska, and Chris had his solar scope out there also. We had a ton of cameras on it. We also launched a balloon. We got some beautiful footage from the balloon of the eclipse. And even though, and I'm sure Chris enhanced this, but, you know, I looked at bunches of footage of that, tried to overexpose it and everything, and you simply could not see any features of the moon itself. And the reason that I did that is because I was seeing all these pieces, and some from the disinformation community, of what's called Earth shine, right? Supposedly Earth has this, well, not supposedly, Earth has this much higher albedo. And in the area of totality, which we were in Alliance, Nebraska, which was an area of totality, we should have been able to see this incredible earth shine going back on the sun. Not only could we not see it, but even overexposing the images, we also could not see it. So, you know, I don't believe that for 1 second. Okay, and Crow's going to take a break for a second. But you know, I just think that there are definitely other objects, and I think there is something to the Rahu and Ketu. Now, I know, like Cami, for example, thinks that these are some sort of nodes, and she's actually diagrammed it out and has a way that she's made this work. And we will be presenting that at some point in time, because she's just recently been working on a model for this. But yeah, pretty amazing stuff. And I don't...
Even in the Royal Academy of London talks about non-luminescence bodies. In the, I believe, was in the 18th centuries. I have the books, but it's in Spanish. But it's not only the Asian culture that talks about two black body in the skies.
But when I first saw that, it sure reminded me of what the moons around Jupiter look like. I just put a picture in the chat if you want to bring it up, comparing that shot from the airplane to the moons of Jupiter. And to me, they look very similar.
Yeah, I can see that, except, I mean, the moons of Jupiter look a little bit more solid and luminous, whereas these objects kind of look, you know, hollow and circular. But I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I believe. Sorry, Bob. I want to say that I see a few of those. You know, like a black body follow the sun, and sometimes it's appear like it's like in a strange lens flare because it has like a tiny vibration, really strange vibration to be a body out there and the sign location of the sun. But I believe that maybe we can conclude something better if we take, for example, 3 or 4 cameras in different location of the plane and see if those cameras show the same position in those black circles.
My thinking is those things, whatever they are, might always be around the sun. It's only when 95% of the sun's brightness is being eclipsed that we can see them, or when you have distance, perhaps Jupiter is farther away. Whatever it is, maybe we're able to see those things. Who knows? It's just very
from
similar.
the high altitude as well, because I don't think that there was ever any of these shot from the ground level, only from the cruising altitude of the plane, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I play a lot with computers, with lens flare simulations, just for post-production effects. And it's really something that it's like, when you see the shadow of the clips, that, that pattern, the strange pattern on the shadow everywhere in the world where the clips, you can see the clips. So it's like a lens flare of the eclipse. It's not like when you see for multiple cameras and people, they never are the same. Maybe sometimes you have 4, sometimes you have 3, sometimes you have 2, and you can clearly see like all the lens flare which is in the camera lens change at that point. And maybe in the video you are seeing now, you can clearly see how the position of the sphere changed based on the angle of the camera. So for me, it's not a solid object. For me, it's it's like the shadow effects of the clips, but this time in the lens flare of the camera.
Yeah. Or maybe the lens of the atmosphere itself, right?
Or so could be something like that. Yeah.
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 That's a hell of a piece of footage, man.
Isn't that good? That's the first time I've seen it.
I saw this a long time ago, and it makes you wonder. Another possibility is that that's some kind of technology up there, but it sure doesn't look like it, does it?
No. In fact, it seems to fit the description of Rahu and K2 very well. Remember, because Rahu and K2 were it was beheaded, right? The head was cut off from the rest of the body, and the rest of those orbs seem to kind of form like a snake type body. Now this is interesting because this David Weiss's footage was an idea that I think is really interesting, that we were kind of tossing around the idea of maybe the eclipse was actually coming from behind the sun, as if there was some sort of projection that was coming from, the backside, and that's where the sun is actually manifesting as a projection, and maybe this dark body was actually passing behind it, which is an intriguing idea. And this is a really good illustration of what David was trying to say in that. I don't know if you had seen this before, Crrow.
I did. He sent it to me, and I love when people begin to do this. I saw another guy took a mock-up of a disc that looked like the moon and dip it in water to show the effect of eclipse. So these ideas are really good ideas, but I'll add something. There's another comment here that was put in. Someone commented H alpha is in the visible light spectrum. So why wouldn't, I guess what they're getting at, why wouldn't the things we see through a hydrogen alpha scope be visible? They say zoomed out, but I assume they mean with just our eyes in the visible. But the fact remains, without a hydrogen alpha scope, you cannot in any way that I know of, see surface detail and the prominences of the sun, however you want to classify hydrogen alpha. But anyhow, back to you.
Can you see the prominences with any other spectrum?
I think you probably can. There are other tools that are more high end, and then there's some that kind of they black out the shiny, center disk of the sun. But I think for the common man, mostly what any of us would have any chance of affording is hydrogen alpha, but there are certainly higher end tools.
And Crrow, you were talking about the Vedic texts earlier. Isn't it true that they report that the moon is further than the sun?
I have seen that, but in the film "Shoot the Moon" that Jason just did, we included a Tibetan proverb, which I think relates to what we're talking about. The Tibetan proverb basically says, "The closer the moon gets to the sun, the darker it gets." So that would be an interesting to think about.
And also the Vedas talks about the planet being like millions of kilometers away, and you can supposedly reach by, walking. I say walking, I mean for walking on land or transporting on land.
Right. Part of the problem with the Vedas is I think they originally came to us in Sanskrit, and there is so much subtlety in communication. And since you speak Spanish, you understand when you switch to English, you lose a lot of descriptive power. There's no gender in English. There's no, I can't understand if someone's trying to be polite to me unless they say the word sir. The older languages have all these things, and apparently Sanskrit had many times the communicating abilities to embed things in the language. So we've got to realize that what we know of the Vedas has been translated, and of course anytime you translate things, you're certainly losing meaning if the language it's coming from was more complex. So I would point out, are these metaphors, are they similes, are they literal statements? These are hard things to know.
Yeah.
What makes that so ironic, though, is that English has so many words. Like from what I gather, maybe I'm wrong here, but the English language has so many words in the vocabulary, like way more than most languages, right? So isn't that kind of funny that we don't have the ability to express certain things that other languages indeed have, although we have way more words than they do in our vocabulary? It's just kind of ridiculous to me. But I was introduced to the Vedic sort of astronomy or astrology or whatever, cosmology, pretty early on, 2015, and I was turned off by it just simply because it they've got elephants holding up these different levels of the heavens and stuff, which that's all changed now. I definitely look at that Vedic sort of explanations of Rahu, Ketu, Mount Meru, and take it with a little bit more credence. But again, when we see this solar eclipse, I'm not trying to be a stick in the mud here, but we see an object that is apparently identical in size to the sun, transiting the sun, about where the moon should be at the time, even though we can't see the moon.
You don't see an object, though. I would point out, you see a blackening bite taken out of the sun. At no time do you see an object.
Sure. Okay. Well, granted. Right. And again, I'm not even going to argue that the moon is probably an object. I don't think that it is. It may not be. But I just I want to be convinced. This is where I'm sitting. I've heard a lot of people say, that they know for sure that the moon is not transiting the sun during a solar eclipse. And I just haven't seen anything, or I haven't heard a convincing enough argument to suggest that it may not be the moon. I still reserve the possibility that it is the moon, whatever the moon is.
Well, the other thing is try to locate a new moon in the sky. See if you can do it.
Right.
I've said for a long time, and I've just never had the right conditions. When I was in San Diego, the chemtrailing was so bad at the end there. I barely could film. Without the full spectrum camera, it was almost not worth it. But I would point out that there are people in the forum who started to calculate and use tools that are similar to Stellarium that showed that the new moon was not right in front of the sun. But I'm here to tell you that language has meaning. Why do we call it a new moon, a young moon? Isn't it the millions and millions of years old moon that's always been here? Apparently not. And I think that it's these little clues that really begin to steer the way. But if you want to maybe try to build some evidence for your own self, I would suggest to you maybe try to do your own calculation of where the moon is using tools that are available, and see if you can come up with what's been posted in my forums, that where the new moon should be is not directly over the sun.
Yeah,
no, granted.
Above it or below it, you would think you'd be able to see that glint or to see some sign of it being a physical body that's coming in front. But yeah, as Crrow said, you can't see that at all. And the other thing, just to back up what Crrow said about the Vedics, that is a problem, is when you have this old text that's been translated now, and there is no consensus on what they're even talking about when they talk about a yojana, I think is what it's called, or I might have that word wrong. But when they talk about that distance, well, I've never seen any kind of definitive answers to how many miles that is. I've seen ranges from, it means 2 miles and up to 8 miles. So again, it's all guesswork, and we're just trusting what other people have translated out of text, and we don't know that it's even accurate.
Yeah, very much so. And another thing also, I don't believe the moon is physical at all. I also believe it's some sort of an aberration. But, we've talked several times on this channel, Crrow, about LIGO. And of course, that's the gravitational observatory that NASA has put together. And it seems like their only way of detecting gravity, again, I've said this a million times, but, it comes from an event that happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, right? Meaning 1.4 billion light years away from here, we had 2 black holes that collided, and that gravitational wave came all the way across the universe. And on the 100th anniversary of Einstein's, prediction of gravity, or his model of it anyway, we get the LIGO detectors that have been set off. But then, you have to wonder about it, because if the LIGO detectors were made to detect gravity, then why is it that they're not detecting the gravitational pull from the moon, right? That raises trillions of pounds of water, up from the oceans. It doesn't detect that. So, there's just so many things and not to mention the position of the moon is not commensurate with the tide levels either. And I'm sure you already know that. So, the whole idea of the moon being gravitationally bound and causing the tides is just nonsense. So I tend to think that it is also some sort of an aberration, very much like the sun is.
I'll point something out that probably will jar some people. But Jason, are you on? Do you know the name of the image, Jason, that S. Frog was talking about? It's all the famous scientists, Madame Curie, Einstein are there. Do you remember, is it Lacan or something like that, the name of that image?
Let me see if I downloaded it, because sometimes I keep those.
All right, so there's a famous black and white image. As a matter of fact, we were made fun of on the Big Bang Theory. By the way, the laws of thermodynamics prove the Big Bang is nonsense. But on the Big Bang Theory, they mock it up to put things into that photo of all those famous guys who would go on to work on nuclear weapons. Madame Curie, Einstein's there. That image has been proved to be a complete fraud. Not only that, every image you see of Einstein, he's wearing the same clothes. We are told that that's what he liked to wear, so he just wore the same thing over and over and over. But you see, the problem with Einstein is he came on the stage and said, guess what, guys, ether doesn't exist. Since the beginning of natural science in this world, there were 4 philosophical elements, and the 5th was ether. Yes. And there were people who proved that ether existed. Michelson and Morley were a couple. There were more, but Einstein comes along right after these guys prove it, and they also proved the Earth wasn't moving with light, by the way. And Einstein just dictates it doesn't exist. No experiment, no explanation. And I'm here to tell you, Einstein was an actor. Marie Curie did not exist as a living human being. Probably Einstein didn't either. If he did, he was an actor paid to do the job. People should look up that old black and white image of where Marie Curie, Einstein, and all the other famous people are there, and start measuring the heads, jacking up the levels in Photoshop, and you will quickly come to understand that is a construct. And yet that image is the basis for the famous people of modern science as we have it today. And it's a construct.
I think I've got it.
Beautiful. So
one of my followers, S. Frog, did just a knock-up job taking that apart. He measured heads. He did what I always do with all NASA's image, jacking levels up. And he put a whole list out in my forum of why it was fraud. But we already knew Marie Curie is just mercury encoded. We already knew that, because Hoaxbuster Channel proved it in such a sublime way that is undeniable. And that key that Hoaxbuster provided me opened about 1,000 doors in 2 seconds.
Can everybody?
Curie, that's funny. Yeah, you'd think that they would be more subtle with LIGO, but they were just pretty blatant with that one, weren't they?
Yeah, we hear you,
Well,
Jason.
Okay, I just switched to my studio.
Oh, that's
Here's
better.
I believe this is the picture you're referring to, bro.
There it is. Do you know what it's called, Jason? Lisan or the Dyson? I forget. There's a name for that place where that image was taken. This image is a construct and a fake. It's proven fake, and some of the evidence resides in Crrow 777 Radio's membership forum, but you can see Madame Curie. And by the way, they poke us in the eye with this all the time. They always use this to put digital watches so that people can look at that image and find things that don't belong there, leading your mind astray, when really what you should be paying attention to is what people don't belong here. What people were made up, not the Photoshop digital watch that someone added to fool us all. This image is basically the basis of famous people in the modern era of scientism and science and hypermaterialism. Einstein's there, and this is a construct. And in my view, Einstein is a construct, Marie Curie is a construct, as are all the guys who claim to have contributed to nuclear weapons. They're all constructs.
It says that it's from Marie Curie's 1911 Nobel Prize win, which is her second for the discovery of radium and polonium.
Well, anyone who gets a Nobel Prize should already sound the alarm, you know.
Yeah, I've been nominated for one.
It's radiation.
Now, and when you say construct, you mean like just totally fabricated people?
Who knows how many of them are real, but the image is fabricated, and some of the people, like Marie Curie, never existed as a person. That might be an actor playing her, but if people take the time to scrutinize this image, do things like proportions of heads to body, jack levels, so you can see where it's been edited, you will quickly understand what we come to know in the forum. And this was all on the tail of Hoaxbuster, proving that Marie Curie was an encoding of mercury to start the nuclear weapon argument, to get people to believe in nukes as a dangerous thing. When truly, probably the radioactive elements, one of the guys who did this, S. Frog in my forum, he bought radioactive elements that you can get, that anyone can just order, and he began to experiment with them. Meanwhile, this guy's a retired engineer, and he began to discover all this. What I currently think is probably likely is, if you go to Hoaxbuster's YouTube channel and you look at him showing you what happens in secret Masonic halls, it'll tell you how to start the great work in terms of alchemy. And one of the things is you got to find the stone that's hidden. We've begun to consider that maybe all these nuclear elements that are not nuclear, but they are radioactive, but they won't harm you in the way that you've been told they will, are necessary in alchemy to do the great work of alchemy. And so what they've done is outlawed them all, and they stockpile them all, so only the richest, powerful people can get access to them. We suspect that's what's going on. But if this image is a construct and becomes commonly understood to be, it tells you something critically important about the foundations of science and scientism in our world now.
Yeah, and just so you know, I'm totally with you on this concept of fabricated people. A couple that I've took interest in were William Shakespeare and Henry Cavendish. Because, the Cavendish experiment was pretty heavy in terms of the whole. That's where we get the gravitational constant, right? And if you look into him a little bit more deeply, the guy is there's a lot of mystique around him. He didn't really have any friends. He kept to himself, like, very intentionally. Didn't, like, people weren't even allowed to be around him. When students asked him questions, they had to do so, like, from very strange circumstances. So it wouldn't be the first time.
No, and he could barely speak, at all, which it just reminds me a lot of Einstein. If you look into they say he could write perfectly in English, yet have you ever heard him speak English? It's kind of hilarious. He has to read, and it sounds terrible. And to me, so many signs of fabrication there.
Same clothes every day. I'm actually looking up. I'm going to get Hoaxbuster. I'm going to go get the Marie Curie clip. I'm going to put it in Skype, and then maybe you guys can put it out for the people in the chat room. This, in my view, if there was an Academy Award not for YouTube clips, this would be where I would award it. This is one of the most important clips I ever viewed on YouTube. There it is in Skype. And if nobody's ever kind of thought in the way that Hoaxbuster is thinking, you need to kind of ease into it and adjust your mind. But I stand by every participle and syllable in this clip, and it is all provable from my point of view in the same way false news works, because it's just versions of the same game.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, in fact, it's remind me like Eric Dollar on the Park interview. He talks about a lot of the alchemist Mercury.
Right.
Using in the past and all these guys. I am totally with you, Crrow, because I have a study from a long time ago, the names of the supposedly science heroes, like Newton, that like refer to the new Aton, the new god, sun god, Galileo Galilei, like you mentioned before.
Yep.
The age of thought, which is in Spanish Eratosthenes, which refer like this god, the Egyptian god called Thoth or Thor, the names that NASA puts on the missions and the rockets and things like that. I don't want to go deep in this, but they are maybe the person exists, but the name is just it's the symbolic names that they use all the time, and that is for sure the way they make history,
That's right. And they use the mind rape techniques that Freud and Jung and others put forward. And not only that, they usually do these things with some kind of a modeling that gives them a 98 or 99% certainty that they'll pull it off in some way, shape, or form. But if you guys have not seen the Hoaxbusters clip, I'll stand behind the work that man has done. And I don't say this about very many people. He is freaking brilliant at picking up the encoding, the Masonic undertones, the encoding and the misuse of alchemy. He's brilliant at taking the text and picking out the coded narratives there. But beyond a shadow of a doubt, what this clip does is shows you that Marie Curie is Mercury encoded. And anyone who's followed any of my work or other work, the importance of Mercury, the double eights, cannot be understated. Even the Apollo lie started with the Mercury missions. This all goes back to the misuse of alchemy. And the caduceus, which shows the double eights. And of course, we all think the caduceus is about medicine. It is not. It's about commerce, it's about thieves, and it's about travelers. That's what the caduceus is about. So the next time you see a doctor wearing a caduceus, you might want to ask him, why aren't you wearing the rod of Asclepius, which actually has something to do with healing people?
Yeah. All right. Well, I will definitely check this out. That's for sure. It looks like it's about a 3-minute clip, so I will look into it. I just subscribed to this guy, and he's another buster, so, we got to go for it.
I wanted to have him on my channel, but his Scottish brogue, I'm pretty good at accents. His Scottish brogue is, most Americans are not going to be able to deal with it. It took me a while to tune in to be able to speak with him. So it's unfortunate. We have a language barrier between us, but this man is brilliant.
Yeah, some folks have trouble with Dr. Lena's Italian accent. Unfortunately, Hoaxbuster makes Scotty from Star Trek sound like he's speaking the King's English.
Yeah, there's a guy, a flat earther by the name Beyond the Imaginary Curve. His name is Dell, and his Scottish accent is so thick I can't even understand him. It's crazy. So,
yeah, the guys in, when the guys in Train Spotting go off on their Scottish, it's about 5 times that. It's hard to, you got to tune your ear in, but it doesn't matter. A mind that's doing, you'll see it. If you can tune yourself into understanding this way of thinking and understanding the encoding of things, which is basically the misuse of alchemy and the misuse of natural science. Basically, it's a perversion of nature, what you're witnessing here. That's what they've done. Alchemy and natural science respect nature. They pray to it. They protect it. They do nothing that nature will not allow. And what you're seeing here is the misuse of those principles for the coming artificial age that we're all going to experience here shortly.
Yep. All right. Okay. So let's move over to the kind of the main subject here. I want to talk about the sun. And I guess the first thing I want to say about the sun is that the current model, the mainstream model of the thermonuclear fusion type of model is, kind of ridiculous. And I think it's being disproved, by a multitude of ways. There are so many anomalies, things that are wrong with it, that a lot of people are actually picking up on this. Of course, not the least of which is, of course, the missing neutrinos that they talk about, which would be kind of necessary in a thermonuclear reaction. The heat transport from the core to the surface. The heat seems to get hotter as it goes away from the sun. You have, again, Don Scott has highlighted the oscillations in the sun's size and brightness. And I was just showing a clip earlier that was shot by a fellow YouTuber, Wide Awake, that shows the sun kind of blinking on and off. And I've seen this myself. I think a lot of people have, but you always, get the idea that maybe it's your eyes playing tricks on you or something like that. The other thing is like the solar wind. As soon as it leaves the sun, it gets faster and faster and faster, which of course is completely counterintuitive to what we would expect from their particular model. It should start out very fast and then dissipate as it goes on. So there's a whole bunch of problems with it. And I think that it's falling, very much, out of the mainstream model. However, it seems like that as I've said before, the powers that be are very resistant to the electric universe model, because once it is known and disclosed that everything that we see, the sun, the moon, the stars, are all electrical phenomenon, then of course, astronomy, astrophysics, cosmology,
nukes.
And nukes, everything has to be completely rewritten, right? All the books on this, and academia is going to take a huge hit from that. And yet this is something that's growing in popularity. It's also growing in being censored. This is something that you can't even really find in Wikipedia. It's not really discussed in Wikipedia because they simply do not want to give any credence to this idea whatsoever. And not to mention, like I said, with the footage that you've shot and that Chris has kind of confirmed, and with all the stuff that the Electric Universe guys are coming up with, all of these things absolutely fly in the face of the mainstream model of the sun and the stars and everything else. And it's interesting, like I said, even the astronauts are saying, well, you can't see, we don't see any stars in space, or at least half of them anyway. They can't seem to make up their mind. But even they're admitting it. Well, you can't really see it without the optics, I think is what one of the guys from Apollo 11 said. So needless to say, it's kind of brought us to this point of, what exactly is the sun? What are we looking at when we are looking up at the sun? We pretty much are sure what it isn't. And the whole idea of electric sun, in my mind anyway, is much more plausible. So this kind of brings us to the footage that you shot, and I want you to kind of talk about that a little bit, Crrow, and I'll kind of play this in the background as I've been playing in the earlier. But I kind of want you to talk about how you discovered this and what you have done to kind of eliminate the idea that it's some sort of sundog or, refracted image or something like that.
Well, at this point, I'm as close to certain as I can be that it's not sun flare. And ironically, when Chris stepped up and did what I did, he did the exact same things I did. He used his hand to do light blocking. He spun the double stack on the front of the scope. He spun it. And he also took a long 3 or 4 foot wrapping paper tube to put it over the scope to ensure this isn't. So I would say that I am 98% certain that this is not lens flare. Not only that, there's all kinds of footage coming up. Not only that, Chris sent me footage where he was just filming a sunrise the other day, and lo and behold, another, I guess we'll call it a body for lack of better descriptive terms, comes poking out from behind the clouds. Here's what I think. Someone just pointed out that hydrogen alpha is in the visual spectrum, and to be fair, I would need to look that up right now to, again, refresh my memory. I did it way back when I first got my hydrogen alpha scope. But I suspect that under the right conditions, and the right conditions being during a solar eclipse, during sunrise, or during sunset, that in the visual spectrum, the spectrum everyone sees with a regular camera, nothing special, they can detect the second body. What's going on here is a hydrogen alpha scope with a double stack is filming it. And what that does is it allows us to see surface detail on the sun, the prominences, and these other things. But Chris is in here with us, right?
Yeah, he's here.
Yes, I'm right here.
So Chris, how certain are you that this is not lens flare? Are you where I am, or are you somewhere else?
I am right where you're at, 98% sure. It's not lens flare.
Not only that, there's enough footage floating around that show double bodies. And again, I'm going to point out some things that were known from time immemorial based on natural science and what I guess we currently call alchemy. Under those philosophical principles that are wholly here to describe nature and what human beings can do within the scope of nature, to include reaching enlightenment or heaven or whatever you want to call a higher state of being, is that the sun is conscious. That is conscious. As a matter of fact, when you go down to the beach in those philosophical ways of thinking about our world, that fire that you're sitting in front of is conscious. And Hollywood's made fun of us plenty of times about this too. There's an old movie about a guy who likes to light fires and burn things up with Kiefer Sutherland's dad. What's his name? Donald Sutherland?
Yep.
And in that, he's the crazy dude who likes to light things on fire, and he constantly refers to the fire as being conscious. They're referring to these older ideas. But having said that, we're at such an early part of the game. I mean, I filmed this in 2016 and I did everything I could think of, but I was so worried that I didn't have enough experience with the solar scope, a few hundred hours tops at that point, that I was missing something. And then when Chris came along, who has a lot more time on solar scopes than I do, I think, we began to talk, and it became pretty clear that when I finally got up the guts, because of the Falconelli research Jason and I did, to announce, I think there's a second body there. As a matter of fact, I think it's a bit like saying there's one God, but there's three gods, but there's actually one God. I think that's the philosophical ideology that's being demonstrated in all this. In other words, the Father would be like the sun we don't see most of the time. The sun would be the sun we do see, and the Holy Ghost would be the moon. But these things are so far from being proven. These are theories. These are things that I'm bouncing off old, ancient texts. But now Chris and I are going to gang up together, and we're going to do simultaneous viewing and other things with some pretty good tools.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And when you were on Iron Realm Media the other night, I was kind of suggesting, I wonder what would happen if you could. It's unfortunate you can't pull back. There's no zoom on a solar telescope. And a lot of people did obviously ask that question. Well, why didn't you just pull back and look at both of them at the same time? And obviously because there is no zoom. But I think it'd be interesting to have two of them side by side. Or in your case, where are you at, Crrow? Anyway, what part of the world?
I'm in Rhode Island.
You're in Rhode Island. Okay.
So northeast, yeah.
Okay. And Chris is in Colorado. So, I mean, that'll be cool to get it, be able to look at these things from at least across the country. But I think it'd be neat to be able to get them side by side. But, some of the things that make me realize that this cannot possibly be like any type of lens, flare or aberration or anything like that, is because you're literally panning back and forth and you can see differences. On one sun will have prominences and the other one, doesn't necessarily have those features. And as Chris's footage had the telephone lines in front of it. Now, I know a lot of people came forward and said, well, that looks like telephone lines to me on the main image. But now go ahead.
I can address that. What you're seeing in the main image is the hint of where the line should be, but I know how an H-alpha scope works. If there were lines in front of the sun, you would have seen it. I've filmed things as small as birds going across the sun. So in the H-alpha, you would see lines going across. There is no ifs, ands, or buts, and he proves it, showing it over the object that we don't see, whatever we're calling that, the second object. So this is where it feeds into the theory. There's one God, but there's three gods, but there's really only one God. That one God is creating the sun, the Holy Spirit, or the Holy Ghost, right? So is it possible that this other object is creating the sun we see, the moon we see, and so when it is covered with the telephone lines from our point of view, we see the hint of where they should be when we look at the sun we do see. And again, this is all theoretical. It is all very young. These are ideas that I'm working with as we try to learn more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a doubt. We see because I really like the topic of the two suns, and I have a lot of clips, and also two moons, not just two suns. And always it's apparent like this is a reflection in the atmosphere, not in the lens of the camera. But my question is, if supposedly it's gonna be two light sources, it's not supposedly to have two shadows?
Yeah, that came up a lot. So I think that's perfectly logical. I think you could argue that all day long, but the problem is would our naked eye pick up the second shadow, since the object casting it can only be seen in hydrogen alpha, as far as we know, at least at certain times of the day.
Okay.
But that's a really good point. But what if the other object is beyond the hard, fast barrier, beyond the firmament? It almost looks like you're looking through water or glass. It's kind of out of focus, but you can still see the edge. So what if it's literally creating the source or the energy for the sun we see? These are the ideas that I'm thinking about, but your logic is sound. If there's two light sources, then I think we could argue that two sets of shadows should be detectable even in H alpha. I don't know if you could see that with your naked eye, but nonetheless, it should be detectable in some way. But then if you place the other object outside of the barrier, then what does all that mean?
Yeah, in fact, I don't know if I can share my screen, Bob.
Absolutely.
Just for
No
just
screen shares for you, bro.
Okay, guys.
Yeah, fire away, Eru, anytime you're ready.
Yeah. Okay. No, I just want to. I don't know if you are seeing my screen now.
Yep, we see it, and you are presenting.
Okay, and I showed this video a few times in the past, but because when I trying to recreate all the phenomena involving the sunset and the sun behind the clouds and all that kind of stuff, I really replicated in computer simulation without any problem at all, based on only one sun light source, of course, and take into account that the clouds are volumetric objects, and if you have a really light source, really power light source, is going to fade it into the color of the clouds. So it's like when you have a really light power in something transparent, you're going to mix it.
Right.
This is not the point. The point is, when I really spend a lot of hours trying to recreate things with my tool, which is a computer, and trying to observe in the reality. And what I did here was, and I hope you are looking the right monitor, right? You are looking at a PowerPoint document.
I see what you're doing.
Okay, perfect. So when I recreate like a glass atmosphere, it's not a glass. I prepare a glass reflection in the computer, because if not, it's going to take me like a millennium to render. So I condense all the atmosphere layer in one solid object, just to see how the light behave. And when you have these kind of properties into when you put the light reflection in the glass or volumetric objects and things like that, you can recreate two suns, of course, like you see here. Like it depends of the point of view of the observer, right? And
what quality of light, if I can ask you, what quality is that light? What is the light? Are you using an infinite light source? What kind of light?
Yes, it's an infinite light.
Okay.
It's rendered with Arnold, but the point of maybe I make some twist. But what I'm trying to say is, like, for example, you can also replicate an isotropic behavior of the light, which is something that we see in our real life, which is the property of the light to spread out and form a circle. And when I trying to say with these two objects in the sky, that for me is something more a behavior of the dome or firmament of just the layers accumulated in the atmosphere that acting as a glass. It's because when you see here, for example, the real life scenario, you can clearly see how the camera rotates around the ring of light, and it's not a lens flare. You are actually filming a local position of these reflections in the sky. It's not based on the light entering into the camera. And if you showing that kind of things to people, maybe the person believe that there is 5 suns in the sky. Sometimes I see, and let me just open maybe the library to don't get confused. Let me go very quickly to my files. Let me just put 2 suns. I believe maybe this one here. I am looking in the other monitor. Let me just go very quickly. I almost have it here. Here there is one. For example, this is, for example, there is a sunrise, sorry, on the seashore, and sorry for the quality of the video, but here, for example, you can see one of the sun, or maybe the actual reflection of the sun, because I don't know which is the original one. And here you can start see the other coming, and also with refraction in the sea, in the ocean, and almost the same properties. The only properties that a reflection doesn't have is the shadow. So for me, when I see this, and based on my study on computer graphics, I believe, okay, we are seeing one actual object, and the other is a reflection in the atmosphere or the layers of the atmosphere. And of course, it's not going to be 2 shadows because we have only one light source. And I see a lot of behavior in the atmosphere with the sun dogs, with the rainbows, with this 360 spiral light projecting by the sun, the anti-crepuscular rays, the crepuscular rays, things like that. That for me, we are talking about one light source, which of course is not the actual sun that we see. I believe, you did, we are seeing the projection of the light. We are seeing the projection of the moon, which is in the atmosphere, because, for example, when you go up high enough in the atmosphere, you can no longer see the stars. You need something like the Sophia plane of NASA and see another spectrum of the light. You need something like a radio telescope to see the stars when the atmosphere is not enough to project those lights. So maybe the sun that we see, the moon that we see, is a projection of those light in the atmosphere.
I'm with you. What you're doing here is incredible. I mean, I can't say you're wrong. For all I know, you're spot on. The difference between the way that I'm coming at this right now and you are is you're modeling it, and nobody can make fun of that. You're doing what you're doing. What I'm doing is going back to the oldest source of text. Like one example you can look up is what's called the Masonic tracing boards. Have you ever seen how the sun and moon and the pillars and everything you see in the Masonic tracing board, but there's a hole through these clouds and there's a light source coming in, hitting the sun, going off and hitting the moon, and then the light coming from those, there's little angels holding magnifying glasses. These are the kinds of ideas that I'm looking into. But what you're doing here, I don't think you can argue with what you're doing here as a possibility. I mean, you're demonstrating it.
Thank you. But here, I believe this is one of the most, for me at least, one of the most clear examples, because this is our videos around the world that showing this phenomena. But here we can, maybe some of you guys have been seeing this before, but this is a really nice quality. It's a person on the sea, which are talking. Can you hear the audio of the video?
No.
Okay.
You can reshare though with sound.
Yeah, let me just resharing very quickly. Okay, and
I would ask while you're setting that here, Rue, how come we didn't see tons of double sun images 5, 6, 7 years ago? Why is it all now happening?
I completely, I don't have any answer because 7 years old, I never I never look at the sky like I did from the 4 years ago to now. So I can't answer that.
Okay,
But
so
this
here
is-
I am out here in September, and as you can see, there's obviously a really very clear planet that is right north of the sun. And wow, I would love to say it was the moon, but since the moon happens to be right here on the opposite side, there's no way it is. And since we all have been taught in school that Mercury and Venus do not.
So when I can compute this, and in fact I did. For me, this is the real object, and this is you can clearly see in the distortion of the cloud. Here, the clouds accumulate all the light, so this is the real sun, if you want to see it that way, and this is the reflection of the sun. Why we don't see this all the time? Maybe it's because the atmospheric conditions. Maybe I don't know exactly. I can answer that, but there is clear something that we see one object and one reflection of the object. That for me is my opinion.
There's a test you could do here to help you along. That sun that you suspect is the real sun should be exactly the same size as the moon. So in an editor, if you draw a circle around it and then went over to the sun to see if they're about the same, that would begin to support what you're saying.
Well, for example, this is if I take a screenshot there, and if I go to the part of the video where the woman filmed the moon, which is something, let me go back that, and I paste it here. I did it really quickly, okay, but I believe if I take this and I paste it here, you can see it's a complete match.
Yeah, they're very close, so that starts to support what you're saying.
So no, and in fact, when you when you start compute all these atmospheric phenomena via computer, of course, it's a model. It's just a computer. It's not real life. But you can create all this kind of behavior of why the sun cut off in the horizon. You can always also show why the sun it's like behind the clouds or intermediate the clouds and things like that. And of course, you can also see how the clouds or volumetric object which amplify the light of the sun, of the reflection of the sun, not the actual object of the sun. And I have a lot of other clips showing two suns and only one showing two moons, but with the same kind of phenomena, which is the apparent moon, the reflective moon, and the actual moon. But just I want to share this.
Here's I totally appreciate what you're doing, but I mean, you can't argue with modeling. So what it comes down to is, are we interpreting it? And if you can begin to replicate what we're seeing, that has to be considered seriously. But when I start to ask myself, wait a minute, what? 6, 7 years ago, I never saw pictures of a double sun. And now it seems like everybody and their brother is posting them. So I consider these things. And then I go back to the Masonic tracing boards. And then I go back to the old alchemical texts. My only issue is this. Can a human being become something more? Because if a human being can become something more, that's part of what's encoded in secret societies and religions, in old traditions, in alchemy. All these ideas of a human being can make it to heaven, or a human being can become enlightened, however you want to look at a human being becoming more. And if it is possible for a human being to become more, almost certainly, in my view, everything I've read says the sun plays a role in these things. So that's the angle I'm taking. But I got to tell you, Iru, what you're doing here, I think it's critical. And I think it's important that somebody does do these types of just rational modeling to try to show one possibility.
Thank you. I'm trying to replicate things, because like 3 years ago, I really start to looking in this flat Earth topic and say maybe the sun it is between the clouds, but for me it doesn't happen, because it's like, okay, if the sun is between the clouds, of course we are gonna have a lot of footage from the planes, of from high altitude balloon, things like that. And when I'm starting to recreate this and trying to create this via computer, I didn't explain in detail what I did here in this simulation, because it's going to take me a lot of time, but I can replicate it. And I believe something that the people get confused all the time is because this kind of situation where we see the moon or the sun, we perceive like it's in front of us, but in real life it's up in the sky, and it's just the way that the atmosphere projects that light. It seems like we are looking the front of the moon, and the moon is going down, or the sun is going down to the horizon, but it's always up. There is never in the front of us. It's just a perspective combination with the refraction in the atmosphere. So if we see everything we see in the sky is like we see through the screen, which is the sky itself. It's like a screen, our atmosphere layers. That is my interpretation, of course, right?
Yeah,
I like your ideas, man.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. And I would just say that I think there's a distinction to make, and I know Iru and I and probably everybody on this panel agree, but it's a subjective, personal, atmospheric, subjective dome, not necessarily a physical dome, although there may be some sort of physical firmament dome. But this is something that is, follows you around wherever you go, and it affects the inbound light from the celestial sources to where, if the sun appears to be on the horizon, it's not actually in front of you. It's just the apparent sun that we typically see appears to be that way due to perspective and refraction. But yeah, I really love the footage that you've got there, Iru, because it demonstrates that nicely. I think that we've got the actual sun and the apparent sun, and these are two wildly different things. And some of the biggest globe Earth arguments are for what the sun and moon can and cannot do. However, when you've got this wild refraction process going on to drastically change where the sun appears in the sky, I would say the sun can do pretty much anything. I wouldn't be surprised, but yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
In fact, this is the last scene that I showed. This sunset in I believe is St. Martin, Iceland. Here you can see, the sun. And I took this as a reference to replicate with the computer simulation. And here you can see the lens flare, which is inverted, as always, is going to be in the lens of the camera. And this here is like it's like a lens flare of the matrix. It's not the lens flare in the camera, but it's like the lens flare in the atmosphere. That is why it's not inverted.
But again, this begs the question: why weren't these images commonly shot just a few years ago? That's a big question for me. And
this is, I believe, this St. Martin is for 2013. I took this from internet, and the guy who filmed this is not a flat earth. He just filmed it because it's like it's like oh, what a nice sunset. But I believe, yeah.
I'm sorry. I was going to say a lot of this footage, at least it came to my attention, Crrow, around 2012, because that's when everybody was saying, "Oh, look, it's Nibiru," right? So it's been 6 or 7 years, something like that, maybe even a little longer. I remember Nancy Leader talking about it all the way back in 2003.
Well, I guess I could add, okay, what about the 90s? Why didn't we see all this in the 90s?
Well,
or
we
the
don't
80s,
have so many equipment to film that.
That's partially true. I accept that.
They're regular people, I mean.
But one of the things is Chris, Ben Matre, and I, when I get warm enough and we can get our things out, one of the things I think we should expect to see is if he's filming in Denver, he's a mile high, I'm at sea level. We're almost at least 2,000 miles apart. I'd have to look to know exactly. you'd expect to see an angle change between what I'm filming and what he's filming. So maybe with both of us filming and I could be on a cell phone and say, hey, Chris, go shoot the object we don't see. Now go back to the sun we do see, and both of us doing it at the same time. Maybe there's more things we can deduce, but I am totally open to the idea of reflections off what's called the firmament or the barrier. I'm open to the idea that the light source is on the outside or there's something in between us and it. It's just clearly something's going on here that has not been described, and I think it's probably a very important thing.
Yeah, and Crrow, right before you leave, can we reiterate the power line footage for everybody? Because that's a rub for a lot of people. I've seen a lot of comments on that.
Right.
Okay. You want me to go ahead and just bring that part of it up?
Sure.
I'm trying to remember where it is.
All the way at the end.
Oh, is it all the way at the end? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, there it
Right.
is. Got it.
This kind of proves it can't be lens flare because the power lines are in front of the object. If it was lens flare, it'd be the other way around.
I'm seeing some chatter on the social media about that as well. Folks are saying you can clearly see that the telephone lines are in front of both of them. Can you guys address that?
Yeah, let's address that. Here, the lines are there. That's what you see in an H-alpha scope, black, if anything crosses the sun. The lines are not in the other image, but the hint of where the lines are in the other image. But there's no lines there. You see a coloration change. No focus was changed. No double stack was changed. So what this tells you is that that's not lens flare because the phone lines are in front of it. But it also suggests that there's a projection happening between the two because you can see the hint of where the line should be on the sun we see it with our eyes. But the lines are not there. No focus has changed, no equipment has changed, but nonetheless, you see the whisper of where the phone line is in the other image. To me, that connects them, which is why I'm working with the idea that the sun we're not seeing commonly is somehow projecting or contributing to the sun we do see. But this is a critically important, getting the phone line, this is the most important evidence that I've seen so far. Well, he has more where there's clouds involved too, which all show the difference, but there are no phone lines in front of the sun. You see there's a color differential there. If there were phone lines there, you would see them. And that's the sun you see. So you can't even start to argue that that's lens flare. That's the sun you see with your eyes. But guys, I'm almost out of time here. I've got to eat some dinner, and Jason and I have to prep for a live show.
All right.
Okay.
Well, Crrow, it was great having you. I mean, it's great talking to you guys for the first time. Agree with a lot that you say. The reflection issue is big as far as the sun goes. I've seen a ton of the old ceiling paintings like the Church of San Ignacio, which describes exactly what you're talking about, where there's one angel that's holding a mirror and reflecting the sun. And I think there's so much hidden in that. And so it was great having you. Glad you came.
Well, I'll tell you another thing. For those who follow the podcast, we had a naturopath and a homeopathic doctor from Italy who also prescribes spagyric remedies to cure people. Spagyrics is alchemy of the plant world. When he saw the Double Sun episode we did, he commented to another person that we know that he's known through his alchemical training for a long time that there is more than one sun. That's something to think about. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys so much for having us on. I'd appreciate it if you'd put links up to our stuff. So if your audience want to see the film or follow us or check out YouTube, that would be great. Jason, anything to add? I got to get ready here.
Well, we're going to address more of the Double Sun stuff coming up. I'll explain to you more about what I'm seeing on social media. I want to make sure these things are getting addressed because it's really important. And of course, we don't know exactly between you and Chris and everyone. We don't know exactly what this is. The whole point is something keeps showing up. And of course, more work needs to be done and is going to be done. And we're going to try and do our best to figure this out. And I will do my best to field those questions on the social media so that we all are working towards the same goal and not in opposition.
There you go. I'm convinced it's not lens flare, but that's about what we know. And we use language like second sun or other object or the thing you don't see. That's because we don't know yet. This is brand new. Even though I shot it in 2016, it took Chris replicating what I did and, luckily shooting the phone line to add a bit more. And Chris and I are going to start shooting together. But anyhow, thank you guys so much for having us on. As you know, we've got the TFR live show tonight. I think we're going to have Max Egan on because he got censored. So anyone who gets censored, I got to talk about.
There you go. Okay,
Pleasure,
well, beautiful.
Man,
Yeah,
Nice to have you on, Crrow. And I've got one more quick screen share if I could.
Certainly, Chris, go right ahead.
Oh, by the way, I've got to bail too, guys. So thank you so much. I got to do basically the same things Crrow does.
Okay.
So let's do this again. It was great chat with everybody, and let's catch up soon.
Okay, sounds good, Jason. Crrow, guys, thank you so much for joining us. I'd love to have you on again in the future, and we have put links to all of your videos and the Shoot the Moon trailer and movie in our show notes. So,
well, thank you for the warm welcome. Definitely appreciate it, and let's absolutely do it again.
Thank you guys so much. It was nice to meet you, Iruru. You have one of the best podcast names ever, and I truly appreciate the modeling you're going to do. And Chris, go ahead and I'll stick here for just another minute to see what you're going to show.
Okay, I'm trying to get it up.
And if you need something about my simulations, please let me know and I share with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Iru is definitely our resident expert on video graphics.
Okay. Video graphic. No, okay.
Did you say women?
Yeah.
Well, that too. Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, there's the viewfinder on the H Alpha.
That's interesting.
Wait a minute. How is that even happening, Chris? That's not the way the viewfinder is a through hole. There should be no way to double image on a through hole.
Exactly. I caught this about 45 minutes before the show.
Wow. So just so everyone's listening, there's like this little film that cuts down the surface brightness of the sun so you can use naked eye, but you're basically looking through a straw. That's the viewfinder on this type of hydrogen alpha scope. But the moment I saw it, I said, wait a minute, how's that even possible? And it's a pinhole too. So the pinhole in the front is creating a double image on the back. Is that what's going on, Chris?
Or it's picking up the other image or the other object.
Damn, dude, you're just getting evidence hand over fist. I gotta get my damn equipment out, man. It needs to warm up quicker.
But when I saw this, I got chills. I'm like, that can't happen unless there's actually something there.
You heard me. The moment I saw it, I said, wait a minute, how can this even happen? All right, guys, I got to go prep up for the show. Thank you so much for sharing links. Thank you much for having us on. We'll do it again on another occasion.
See you guys.
Take care.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Crrow. All right.
And that is a really nice image. And that is why I believe that we have, like, if you can take it in the way of the atmosphere behave, but it's like a lens flare of the atmosphere or in the matrix, if you want to see, like, because if you see two objects in the sky, it's because at least in that projection you see two objects. Maybe one is a solid or the real object, and the second one is the projection, but it's not based on your lens. It's based like in the matrix lens, if you want to see in that way.
Yes, that's amazing. So Chris, this is what we were seeing the two suns in a minute ago?
This looks like dirt or David's footage.
Oh, okay.
Or something.
I didn't see who put it up there. What is this, David?
I didn't put it up. You put it up. It's a sun fade out video.
I didn't put it up. You put it up. Let's get Mikey. He must have put it up. I don't know.
I don't have control over the screen, Bob.
Mikey puts up everything.
Yeah, no, it just popped up. I didn't know where it came from.
That's what she said.
Well, yeah, there you go. All right. Okay, so Chris, you said that you had caught a little bit more footage on this stuff on the double suns. Is that correct?
Yes, and what I've got is where I went out and set up when there was cloud cover to see if there was a difference in the cloud cover over both objects, and that's exactly what I caught. You want me to screen share and show?
Absolutely. We would love to see that.
Okay, my screen share, when I showed that picture, I couldn't see it myself, so.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I updated Skype and I haven't used it since. So let's see if I can get it to.
Yeah, Microsoft, it seems like every time they buy something, they have to screw it up by changing it all the time. Pretty typical. So yeah, that's amazing. This footage has really got me intrigued. There you go. Okay, let's go ahead and share that. And you are presenting.
See the cloud cover over this object?
Uh-huh.
Here's the second object. It's completely covered with cloud cover. Now I'll go back to the other object. Completely covered.
Which one's the real one?
The real sun would be up, but that's the sun that we see.
Okay. So the lower dim one in the lower right-hand corner is the aberration?
Yes, the one that we don't see.
Right, or whatever it is.
Yeah. So then we'll go here. Same thing. You got the cloud cover.
That's amazing. Now, you said that you've been able to do this, to capture this kind of routinely lately, right?
Yes, you can go out and capture this on a daily basis. Now, what I did do is you can go out like 2 hours before sunset, and it's down into or up and to the left. Now, I went out at noon and early, or noon and like 11, 10 o'clock in the morning, and it's up and or down and to the right. So it changes positions throughout the day.
Yeah, and that's actually consistent. Cami has been modeling this particular thing holographically with these little toys. I forgot what they're called. Anyway, it's the little clamshell thing. You've seen it, that you can create the hologram in, and she's been modeling it. She's got a whole bunch of spheres with glow-in-the-dark paint and all this stuff, and she has been shooting some amazing stuff. But we were talking about it, and she was showing me that what you're showing is actually very consistent with her modeling of this, meaning that there could very likely be two actual objects there, which is, it's wild. I mean, the thought of this is just insane to even consider this. But, you know, when you think about it, as Crrow was saying, this has been something the two suns have been talked about almost ad nauseum in antiquity, other cultures. They also talk about that the suns will kind of become manifest, and you'll start seeing these strange things in the sky, in the alleged end days. And some of the things that I'll be showing here in a little bit are even like some of the music videos that talk about two suns in the sky and what the implications of that are. I know a lot of people have already, heard about, the lyrics that have been talking about this. But in a way, it's amazing, but it's also kind of disturbing because of the implications of what it actually might be. So, I don't know. Go ahead.
This was a sunrise video that I did last weekend. And in the comments, I went into the comments last night, and somebody had pointed it out, and I went back in there. I was like, oh, I didn't even catch that. I subconsciously, when I put it up, saw it, but I just discounted it as lens flare.
Right. Yeah, that's what I would have thought it was. Go ahead, John.
You can see it going up behind the clouds, coming down from in behind the clouds. But there could be another possible explanation for it, but it's just amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And then it cut off. It's too bad it cut off early. Go ahead, John. Or was that you trying to talk, John? Or?
I was muted, I think. I didn't say anything.
Okay. I keep hearing these little voice. I'm hearing voices. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's amazing. So you're able to do this routinely with your hydrogen alpha. Have you tried doing this with like the P900 with the solar filter on it? And can you see anything with that?
No, I have not tried with P900 or the P1000.
Okay. I was curious, and I asked you on the other feed or before the show about the hydrogen alpha filters that you can screw on to the front of the Nikons. And I'm curious to try one of those to see if, we get any results from that, because that would be great. It'd be a lot better to be able to use the Nikon with that filter on it than going out. And I don't know what you paid for your solar scope, but I'm sure it wasn't cheap.
About $2,700.
Yep. And you'd think that one of these days, does anybody make one with a zoom on it, or are they all static?
No, just like your telescope, your 10-inch. There's no zoom capabilities on it. All you can do is change your eyepieces.
Yeah, that's true.
And with this, I spent 3 weeks trying to come up with a way to even put my digital camera to this telescope. And they have an adapter that you can drop a eyepiece in, so you could change the zoom. But with the way the camera is built, they tell you to be careful, because when you put the lens in there, that when the mirror flips open, you can crack the mirror inside your camera, and you got to get it extremely close to try and zoom in. But you can't zoom out any further. The zoom out on this, it's the widest angle that we can get through these hydrogen alpha telescopes is what we're shooting.
Right.
So there's no way to zoom out to try and catch both of them in frame at the same time. And that was another one of the big comments that people were hollering about. Just zoom out when you show both of them in the frame. Well, you cannot do that. The telescope is not built to zoom out so that you could catch both these objects. If we could, that would have been the first thing I'd have done.
Right. Well, that would be interesting, because if the hydrogen alpha filters actually work in a camera, that would give us then zoom capabilities, because you don't really need a whole lot of zoom, for the sun, especially pulling back, to get a nice wide perspective of the sky and see if that's there. So I don't know. I may just buy one of those for the P1000 and see, if it works. It's only like $30. I think it's probably worth it.
Hey, Chris, a question for you, sir. The proximity of these two apparent objects, whatever we want to call them, is it pretty much static, or is there a variable in the proximity of the two objects, or have you?
Oh, you mean the separation between the two?
Yes, sir.
No, I just discovered here last weekend that like from noon till from like sunrise till noon, it's to the opposite direction as it is at sunset. So what I plan on doing is going out and doing an all-day observation and seeing when it flips, or if it just flips all at once, or if it gradually makes its way around 180 degrees.
Gotcha. Huh.
So like Crrow said, we're just starting to try and pinpoint and come up with more data to try and pin down exactly what this is.
Right, because if if there was a static distance between the two that never changed, we could, that would support the theory or whatever that it's two separate objects. But since there is this sort of change over the course of a day, then I think that sort of leans more towards it being an like an apparent projection, reflection, whatever, as Iru is postulating.
All right, I'll do one more screen share if I can. I'll steal one from Iru.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. Hey, don't tell me anymore for my screen shares.
Okay, whenever you're ready, Chris. But yeah, this is amazing. The other thing is not only is there this infrared footage, or the hydrogen alpha, footage that's going on, but there has been a rash, like I said, since like 2012, when everybody was talking about Nibiru coming, and we actually even did, a show that covered a lot of that, where it seemed like it was being telegraphed to us in movies like Star Wars. You had, like Tatooine had the dual suns, which looked precisely like a lot of these dual sun Nibirus that people were claiming was Nibiru. And, since then, I've seen a lot of it. But the thing that really makes me wonder is that not all of the dual sun footage, it shows the suns like, in close proximity to each other. I've seen some extraordinary footage where literally you'll see the sun and moon on one side, and then they'll pan like 120 degrees across the horizon, and there will be what appears to be another sun. And it's like, okay, what is that? So that may be, what Iru was talking about as far as those type of aberrations. But, I don't see how they can just be willy-nilly happening, especially in the heliocentric model. I could certainly see it if there was a dome above, but it's just very interesting. And I also noticed that a lot of these seem to take place more often in the north, the far north, like Alaska or northern Canada, than they do like around the equator or, in the general United States area. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but it just seems like that's the way that they are coming about.
Bob, do you ever think that the dome could be working like that hologram toy you guys have, which is a dome on top of a dome? I mean,
yes.
that's what's happening, in my opinion.
Yeah, I believe,
like
I mean, of course we can have a dome. In fact, in Latin, the word dome means house. So, of course, we are under a house, if you want to see it that way. But all the phenomena that we analyze under the 20 kilometers in the altitude. So the question here is, when you goes up, and if you, I have studied like thousands of hours in terms of high altitude balloons and sounding rockets, and you can clearly see how the sun and the moon are really, really tiny in comparison when you see from the ground, because of course you are above all the amplifier and magnifier layers called atmosphere. So the question here is that we know that NASA has this plane called SOFIA for study the radiation, if you want to see in that way, of the light in the sky, not the actual in the visible spectrum. So we need to, to complete things, talking about the lights in the sky. We need to go really high up and observe, a same phenomena that we see here on the ground up in the sky. Because when you go up, you don't have any more that magnifier. And so the things up in the sky, the things, the light behave differently than the ground. So we are, we are creating models, but we are creating models only from the point of view of the ground and not from above this screen layer called the atmosphere. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
No, I absolutely understand what you're saying. And you're right. Obviously more perspective on this would be very helpful. And, maybe we can get, more balloons outfitted to give us different perspectives of stuff like this, even though I'm not sure, how much good that will do. That'll give us definitely a higher elevation perspective, but, we just have to experiment.
Yeah, because
if we had
I don't
budget
believe
for one day, we could go for years.
I go to live in the Iceland if I have that budget, but I believe that all these double suns and double things that we see from the ground at that same point in time and location, if you have the possibility to go really high up and really quickly, you don't see anymore those two objects. We see two objects because we are leading with all this atmospheric behavior. But if you can go up at that particular time, you stop seeing those two objects, and you maybe see only one. And if you go really, really, really high, I don't know how much. Maybe it's like Dr. Lindgren talks about. You can even see the sunlight because you don't have any medium to project the light.
Yep, true. Chris, did you have something you wanted to share still?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead and present whenever you're ready, and I'll flip over to you.
Okay, I think I started screen sharing.
Nope, we're not seeing it yet, but sometimes it takes a second.
Somebody else is screen sharing, I think.
Well, I am, but I can stop screen sharing. Let's see if that helps. All right, now try it. Stupid Skype.
Can you see the image?
Nope. Not seeing a thing. Except your picture.
Yeah, you're seeing the picture of the telescope?
No, just seeing you. We're not seeing anything. You're not screen sharing.
Oh.
It's always something.
Yes.
Hey, you were sharing a minute ago, so I don't know what happened, but
Maybe Jeran touch some button.
I think it's the arrow's not going to let you have any of the screen shares.
That's what it is.
Don't blame me. I'm not responsible.
Yeah, you are responsible for everything here in this show. All the bad things.
All the bad things, yeah.
That's one more time.
Yep. Only when it comes to audio, though.
Nothing.
King.
Still not seeing it, Chris. That's crazy.
Okay. Let me drop the picture to you, or the two pictures.
Okay.
I'll put them in the Skype chat.
Okay, fair enough.
Find them.
All right. Sorry, guys. Little technical issue. Nothing too bad. Just waiting on some image here. But yeah, I think it's interesting because, like I said, we've got so many pieces of footage now that are coming out that are in the visible spectrum that we're seeing this, all over the place. And of course, recently we're starting to see these moon aberrations as well. And again, like I said, I don't know exactly what to make of it, but I'm kind of like Crrow, and I like to tie things into ancient cosmologies, ancient mythologies, if you will, and even biblical scripture, about what it says about some of this stuff. And like I said, it's kind of disturbing because the Mayans, when they've talked about this, these phenomena in the sky, the blue kachina, the red kachina, certain things that have been likened to some of the observations that we're seeing. Near oh, okay. Thanks, Cammy. It's disturbing. It really is. And for example, while Chris is getting that, let me show you one of the things that this is and I can't really show but more in a couple seconds of this because I don't want to get struck, but this is a Soundgarden clip called Black Hole Sun. And that's kind of bizarre, but we see these things that there's like everything's being drawn up to this thing up in the sky. And, we've talked about Brian Austin Lambert's work. Even though I don't care much for Brian Austin Lambert, I have a feeling that he may be onto something, with this so-called plasma apocalypse, because, we do know that our electromagnetic field, our magnetic field is absolutely starting to shift, and it's starting to shift at a fairly dramatic rate. And if this happens and we actually do get a magnetic pole reversal, who knows what could happen, but it seems to me that it would kind of wreak havoc with our plasma upper atmosphere that we've talked about in the electric universe posits. And, I just don't know exactly what to say. And of course, this also combined with what we found out about, the so-called mud floods and the fact that there are resets every so often. It just makes you wonder, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer for everybody even talking about this, but it's not something I'm going to ignore either, because I think that there is sufficient evidence, especially with the really weird things that are showing in our sky. I don't know what to say about it. I really don't. It just seems like all this is happening, and it seems to be happening according to some sort of scriptured prophecy. And it's disturbing. Okay, so Chris, I've got these two images up, and this is the hydrogen alpha scope. And what did you want to say about this?
Hey, Bob, we can't see what you're showing on Skype. It is going out on the feed, but it's delayed. We don't see it on Skype.
Oh, crap.
Yeah, we don't
All
see
right.
it.
My bad. All right, let me screen
Sure it's not
share.
Jaren's bad?
Yeah, it's
Jaren's bad.
Damn Jaren, it's always his fault.
Yes.
I
All right,
have
so
special, keys over here. I'm just pressing different buttons and watching you guys fail.
And that is
Okay.
why you do the pre-show.
Right.
That's right. Okay, so now can you guys see it?
I can see it now. We're looking at a telescope.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, Chris, take it away. If you're
That's the regular hydrogen alpha telescope. That's what it looks like without anything on it. Now, if you bring in the other image, Bob. Okay, that's what we did. We put a big long tube at the end of it to try and cut out any internal refraction or light, other light sources coming into the telescope.
Well, that would certainly seem to do it. This was exactly the same idea that Dr. John Dee had about trying to block any refracted images coming in from different angles when he was observing the laser over the UK test. So obviously, Dr. John thought of this also. Dr. John approved because he was using it. And I thought it was brilliant. It's like, wow, I wonder why people didn't think of this before. But I'm really glad that you decided to do this, because that, that pretty much kills the idea of any type of optical, flaring going across the lens of the telescope.
Yeah, and the longer you make that, the more definite you are that you're not picking up any lens flare.
Yeah, and it's kind of a flat black, it looks like.
Yeah, I had a white one, and I was like, no, I'm going to go with, because you could get some light refraction through white. So I made sure I went and got a pitch black one that would not have any light refraction on it whatsoever.
Yeah, beautiful. So, all right, okay. So let me go ahead and close that out. You guys should still be seeing this other one. So, yeah, we've got that, and then another thing I wanted to show is there's these lyrics for Pink Floyd, and I'll just kind of let them play in the background. I won't play the song because, again, I don't want to get struck, and I know that they're just looking for reasons to try and shut us down for whatever reason. But some of the lyrics, in the sun, like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, saying space may be the final frontier, but it's made in a Hollywood basement. Pink Floyd, of course, has been kind of a staple for a lot of rockers all over the world, and they have had some pretty profound lyrics. And if you have not heard of this song, it's called Two Suns in the Sunset. And it is also talking about, seeing two suns just before some sort of like catastrophic event. Could be a bunch of nonsense, or it could be a predictive programming, or they're trying to tell us something, or whatever. But, we see this happening time and time and time over and over and over again in music. A lot of the people that are in the music industry are obviously, a lot of them are intimately tied with the Illuminati and the elite, and they are privy to things, I think, that the general public is not, and they convey this in their art of music. And so it's just another piece of this preponderance of evidence, where we're being fed this information. It's all out there. In my opinion, everything is out there. Sometimes the way that it's presented is in ridicule or in music or in art or whatever. But the bottom line is it's out there, and you kind of have to use your own discernment to figure out what exactly is going on, right? So anyway, those were the words to that. And I just find it interesting, but like I said, I won't play it, but it's called Two Suns in the Sunset, and you might want to check that out. So, all right, let me see if I got anything else. Now, David, I was showing your sun fade out. This is something that's interesting. And also Chris did some tests about this a while back. It was one of the times that Chris was on our show, and he had been privy to, who was it? The Royal Astronomical Society that kind of let you in on some of their footage. Was that it, Chris?
The Royal Observatory.
Royal Observatory, right. And you were doing some observations of the sun, and although you didn't catch it 100% of the time, you were able to demonstrate that the angular size of the sun is absolutely changing. Even though you didn't catch it 100% of the time, there was a distinct change in the angular size, which of course is something that the Globers tell us is simply not possible. Now, David, on the other hand, even though he's shooting primarily in the visible spectrum, footage like this is incredible. And it seems like if the higher you can get and into the more dry and clear type of atmosphere, the more likely you're going to be able to catch this phenomenon like he has caught here, where the sun is literally shrinking and changing in angular size. And this, in my opinion, cannot be argued, regardless of the fact it doesn't have a solar filter on it. It is shrinking to a point. It is not going down to the horizon. I think this is outstanding evidence that the sun is moving away from us and not setting down below any type of horizon.
Bob, let me say a few things about how I get this and what the trolls are saying about it.
Okay.
It wasn't my intention, actually, to prove that the sun doesn't shrink. The purpose of these videos is to prove that the sun stops going down the quotation 15 degrees per hour when it gets close to the horizon. So, and the only way to do this, it has to be cold and no humidity. It has to be a super clear day. I'm talking royal blue sky all day long with no chemtrails, no clouds. And then you have to film it with a 4K camera because it is so far away. It's so small, you can't pick it up. And you have to film it from elevation. So a 20 megapixel drone with a Hasselblad camera under those conditions works. Now, the trolls will say, this is out of focus. Learn how to focus. This is out of focus because what you're seeing here is about maybe 1/200th of the screen that I went in. I couldn't make any smaller of a box to expand this. So it's just resolution. It's not focus on this. But even if it was out of focus, it doesn't matter. We're seeing the sun. It stops on the horizon. Now that line you see there, that is not the ground. That is us looking across the thickest part of the atmosphere, and it becomes a hard line. If it was slightly cloudy, foggy, chemmy, whatever, that line would be higher and closer to us. My friends that were down on the shoreline on the day I filmed this saw the sunset. They were looking across several miles of water to where there was some low-lying land, and it set behind that land before I even started filming the beginning of this video. So they saw it set from a ground position. So, you know, with these conditions, you can watch the sun. It'll go down, 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 down. It'll hover, and then it'll just fade away. But usually, before that hover, you have an atmospheric obfuscation deck that the sun sets from, goes behind and appears to set from bottom to top. So people say, how that it's CGI. Well, I'm amazing at CGI. I'm better than Iro Landucci, and.
No, that's not true.
And how come I'm the only one that filmed this? How come millions of people haven't filmed this? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the technology to film it is only very new. You have to think about all these things, find the right conditions, zoom in on a sun that is a tiny dot in the sky, and then go in and post, edit, and find it. Zoom in on it and find it. I don't know if anyone else has filmed it, but anyone else can film it under those same conditions. So I've caught it 5 times. On my there's a playlist there that has all the other times I filmed it. They're all slightly different, but they're all pretty close. Bob, if you can go to the video that I put in the Skype chat that says pad video, I was able to I have a glass half sphere. And I put it on the ground, and I brought a light, which we'll call the sun, and I moved it across, keeping it level from left to right. And what you'll see in that sphere is the rising sun. It comes over the top, and it goes down. Now, it's hard to see exactly when it gets down, but remember, there's only a half sphere. It stops, and then it fades out. So...
I listen myself. I think it's only my computer. What I'm trying to say is that I have that same that same thing about the dome and the light.
You modeled that just earlier. Yeah, you modeled it. If you now imagine that you're standing in the middle of that half dome or half sphere, and
I did. And I put a camera inside the dome.
Yeah. So I'm just saying on my video, if you're in the middle of that sphere and you're, a fraction of a millimeter tall, and a quarter inch above you, you have some spotted clouds, and they extend beyond there and beyond that dome that you're in. As that sun drops down, it's going to get eclipsed when you're looking across those clouds, because that makes that opaque horizon. And it doesn't go below, it just fades out. And that's exactly what we're seeing in the sun fade out videos. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting. And while we're on that subject, let me show you guys something else here. And this is what Cammy's been playing with. I talked about the Miroscope is what that little toy is called. And so she's been kind of playing around with this with some fluorescent points. And what you're seeing here is a mirage.
Is a mirage.
This is actually a hologram. What she did is she took she made some balls and she painted them up with fluorescent paint, and she's hitting it with an ultraviolet light. But and then she can actually simulate the moon phases in this. And it's interesting because when you see it in 3D, I mean, that's not there. That's literally a holographic representation. But what she can get is she can get sunrise, sunset, moonrise, moonset, moon phases. Of course, she put all kinds of little stars around it and stuff like that. And it's really trippy. And you get the same effect. Right now, she's got the glass dome on the top of it. But you can also take the glass dome off. And of course, you still get that very, very strong hologram. Anybody that's ever played with a Miroscope, they're really cool. But Cammy kind of took it to a whole new level by... and now there it is. That's without the dome on it. And this is in the dark. But that is a holographic representation of the ball that's down inside of it. And again, she can take her light and go across it and create moon phases. And it's really cool when you hang it upside down from the ceiling. So what you were saying earlier, Dave, about, if this could be some sort of a holographic type of projection from the firmament or the dome shape, as the firmament is described, right? The sun and the moon are within it. And if they are like glass or shiny glass, then we could be looking at that very same effect as far as what she's doing right here. So
right. So the question is the sun and moon that we see within the dome, inside of the dome or within the firmament? So the Bible will tell you that it's I think inside our dome
Don't
area.
bring that discussion again, please.
Well, no, that's okay. The point.
No, the last time took about 45 minutes between Rob and the Sun Genesis.
Yeah. But I don't care about that. Well, the point is, if it's for lack of a better word, I hate using it, a hologram, a projected image. The lunar wave that we're seeing, if it is rolling along the firmament, the dome or whatever, it could be going behind the moon. Just like my eclipse shows that the moon is going behind the sun, that wave could be behind the moon for all we know. Could be in front, could be in behind. Can't rule either one of them out.
Yep, absolutely. So that's pretty fascinating stuff there. What we're seeing, and of course, Cammy loves to model stuff, and she's also been working even more so on the map with Karen B. And it's interesting. She kind of works behind the scenes, without, saying much. She shares a lot of this with everybody on Skype, but, I get to see all this stuff firsthand, and to see this, in real life with the Miroscope, it is absolutely astounding at how much she's got this looking just like the moon, and she's got the phases down absolutely dead nuts on. It's trippy. And of course, as you walk around it, if you've got this hanging from the ceiling and you walk around, it also gives you that dome perspective where it shifts the literal position of the little ball inside, just like Jaron has talked about several times before. You did a demonstration with one of these glass domes, and Cammy's just confirming this.
Yeah, I'm looking at my glass dome now. I have it in a room that I've never had it in before that has recessed lighting all over the place, and I'm looking at it and the stars are all through it. I'm just wishing I could rotate my ceiling somehow. They're amazing tools to do experiments with the optics of the sky, and what they will teach you is we can't trust anything that we're seeing from the ground. There's many explanations for what we're seeing in the sky.
Yep, absolutely true. So anyway, cool stuff.
Can we talk about the Flat Earth Sun, Moon, and Zodiac Clock app for a minute?
Absolutely. I think you had a link here. Let me go find it really quick.
Yep.
And I tell you that the Spanish version worked perfectly, man.
Yeah, thank you. So everyone, please notice the logo. That is the logo for the Flat Earth Sun and Moon Clock, and I'll address that at the end of this very short presentation. A lot of people have been asking about the daylight savings time. If you have the latest version, you'll have the daylight savings. If you look, the sun is pinned to the hour hand, which we all know, and that goes around every 24 hours. If you go into settings, scroll down, turn on the daylight savings, the sun will go into its true position, which is 1 hour behind the hour hand, because they have us in false time, and it actually puts the sun in the wrong place. If it was on the hour hand, you would see that we're just coming out of Pisces, and that's not the case when we're halfway through the Taurus, or whatever sign we're in right now. And then the other thing people are asking me is, it would be great if we could upload our own pictures. Go all the way to the right, select your own picture. You need a dark picture, it could be anything, and bam, you have your own background. So I can't tell you, I get a dozen emails every couple days, people asking if there's a way they can add their own background. So that's a simple way to do it. It's in the app. You just got to scroll all the way to the right through all of the backgrounds. The other thing is seasons. If you want to show somebody seasons, the jump 3 months button will watch the sun. It'll jump 3 months. We're going to go from April to July. And so now it's over the Tropic of Cancer, October now, and then out to what's going to be January. And we're on the outside. So it'll jump 3 months. You can't get it exactly where you want it. The other thing is, right now, everybody, I say this every month, we're at a sliver moon. There's no moon, okay? It's because it's not on the app. And also, today's video, as you can see, is Shoot the Moon trailer. But every day, there's a new video. I usually upload it first thing in the morning. So if you're looking for, one video a day or somebody, it's a good place to find them. And the archive button's next to there. The thing I wanted to bring up is some jealous globe trolls have ripped off my app on the Google Play Store. And if you look at the second one there, which doesn't have my icon, they use the same name, the same description, the same map, but they made a really crappy app. It's literally horrible. They probably spent maybe a couple $100 on it. So it's free, and the reason they did it was to stop people from buying my app, so I could recoup my money and make it even better. So anyone that has an Android, please go download their app and then leave them a review. Anything you want. You can tell them where to find the real app. You can say anything you want, because they can't delete it. They can't control the narrative in the reviews. So that's just Android only. Apple's smarter than that. They will not allow somebody to blatantly rip somebody off. But it's really just an embarrassment on how bad it is.
Yeah, it's amazing that there is people that doing that kind of thing. Yeah, I can't believe it.
Disgusting.
Yeah, one other thing. Well, I'm pretty sure I know who it is, because they said they were going to make an app to combat my app. And
I think maybe I'm trying to say that even Bill Gates and Steve Jobs do these kind of things.
Yeah, probably. Probably. So here's another thing, and I could just do it with Android. If you absolutely cannot afford the $2.99 for the app and you have an Android phone, send me an email, right? Tell me your sad story, and I will give you a code to download it for free. Okay? Hey. I don't have an unlimited number. I have a number of codes. So if you absolutely can't afford the $3, let me know. Okay?
I have 5 codes and I sell it at $1 each one. So please contact me.
He's Skyping.
I have 5.
He's secondary market for the codes. You can sell them for $1. That's awesome.
Scalping apps. That's awesome.
And with $5 here in Argentina, I live 2 weeks. So
yeah,
please.
Well, amazing. So that's what's going on with the Flat Earth Sun and Moon Clock. It's a great tool for waking people up, and it's a great tool just to find out what I check it every morning to see what the high and low temperature is going to be. That's my weather app. It loads faster than the Weather Channel, so I like it.
Yep, I like your featured video too, which is awesome. I especially like the featured video of the recent Flat Earth banjo.
So good,
so good. I mean, talk about destroyed the globe Earth. Wow.
Yes, so good. And listen, if you're going through and you missed a video, the video archive button right next to that brings you to our website, and we have them listed by month, so you can click on the current month and just go back a couple days, click on previous months, because that's what happens. You give it to somebody that's just looking into flat Earth, and they just say, just watch one video a day, and YouTube's not going to feed you any good videos anymore. So we need other sources. Other people need to make playlists. Just make a playlist on your channel and give it to your friend and tell them to go through the playlist one at a time, or give on the app. Just give them the app playlist, or if they have the app, ask them to look at it once a day, watch the video. I try to put short ones during the week, but sometimes there's some videos that are just so good I can't wait to get them out. So that's it. And anybody that's making really good videos, make sure you put a really good thumbnail if you want me to put it up, because it needs to have a thumbnail so people know what they're clicking on. Otherwise, they won't click it.
Right.
And that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so I guess we'll kind of move on from the sun thing, Chris, unless you have anything else you want to say or present or anything like that.
No, the only other thing I'd like to say is I think one of the rubs, the big one, was the power line, and I believe Crrow and I both explained that, because that was a big rub with people. And then the other one was hopefully people understand that we cannot zoom with these telescopes. We have the widest angle that we can get. And that was one of the other big comments that people had a rub with.
All right. Okay. Fair enough. All right. So our friend Mike just kind of sent this to me in Skype. And if you guys, Mike he's a good friend of ours, and he's also a good friend of Alex, Flat Earth Man. But I just wanted to give him a plug on this. In kind of the spirit of the mud floods, he has created a series of videos, 3 parts that I'm aware of now, called Unveiling a Titan. And basically what it is there's this large mountain that is behind his house and also Alex, Flat Earth Man's house. And here it is. That looks kind of like a gigantic elephant. And what's interesting about it is he will actually go through it, go inside the eye cavity, some of the other cavities of this body. And it's amazing that it seems to have some of these biological features of a pachyderm, or these type of large animals. It sounds crazy, but the level that he has gone to document this, it is absolutely an amazing series. I will definitely put this in the show notes for everybody to check out. But it's Stellium 7 is the channel name, Unveiling a Titan, and there's 3 parts to it, and I will go ahead and add them into the show notes for everybody. So check that out. Yes.
Yeah, I had watched part 1 a while ago, and I just scratching my head. I'm like, okay, that's really mind blowing. And then he was Skyping with me the other day while I was traveling, and he's like, "Did you watch the other ones?" I didn't even know it was his video. I watched all 3 parts twice, and my mind is absolutely blown what this world is.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, I was the same way. It's like, wow. So this is hands down the best type of this type of documentary I've ever seen. It was his first effort, and absolutely magnificent job on this. Fascinated.
I met him with Alex. I thought those 2 were the coolest guys, but now he's definitely way cooler than Alex.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. I met him at the conference too, and he was telling me all about this, showing me the pictures and what he was going to be doing.
And the tusks, look at the tusks. They're a dead giveaway.
Is that really part of the?
No,
is that
that's
really
not
part of
part
the
of it.
terrain?
No,
Oh,
John, I'm
okay.
just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Sometimes when stuff is this crazy, you have to make a joke once in a while. But I encourage anyone to watch all three of them. And if you're not really scratching your head wondering what's going on, then you didn't pay attention.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's see what else I have. I have a couple other things here. It's getting after 4 o'clock, but there is a couple things that I want to address before we move on, or before we close out the show. So we got your stuff done, and yeah, got that done and got that out of the way. Okay. So last week, as many of you know, we did a kind of a response video to Professor Dave, who got a haircut, and I got to admit, he looks a lot better. But he did a response to us, and honestly, I don't even know what to say about it. This is a man that is so deeply indoctrinated in his own world, I guess. I don't even know what to say, and I don't even know really if reaching somebody like this is even possible or not. But so what I thought I would do is, rather than dedicate a whole show to this guy, I would just take one segment at a time, maybe one segment a week, and just kind of address it. But, because I honestly don't think that we're going to get through to this guy. Now, Professor Dave, it has a degree in chemistry. And so that's kind of his bailiwick. And he, in this response video, he basically goes through it, and he calls us, Dunning-Kruger, basically asserting how stupid we are and all this good stuff. But there's a few points in here that are so utterly ridiculous that I'm just going to, kind of address them one point at a time. So I'm going to play this really quick, just this one segment, and then we're going to kind of touch, and try not to laugh, guys, because this killed me. So you guys may remember the video I played that we were looking at the battleship firing at a target 25 miles away, and how the Coriolis effect, obviously would be a problem. We all know, we've all heard about the Baller's ballistic argument with Coriolis effect, and how it's, you have to compensate for it to some level. So I'm going to go ahead and play this and then show you his response, and then we're going to kind of address that and go forward. But like I said, try not to laugh too hard, because this is so ridiculous. I mean, the only thing I could say is Dave, for being a science major, doesn't know the difference between conservation of momentum, conservation of angular momentum, or Coriolis effect. So let's hear what Dave has to say in response to one of these points. Here we go.
Sorry, this is not a valid experiment.
25-mile target from the New Jersey has a flight time of 90 seconds. So you're aiming 90 degrees from the ship straight to the equator to hit that lighthouse. And it takes 90 seconds for the bullet to get there. Problem is, in 90 seconds at the equator, the Earth moves 25 miles. So it takes 90 seconds for the bullet to get from the ship to the lighthouse. But in that 90 seconds, the lighthouse moves 25 miles. So you're going to miss it by 25 miles.
Here's the funny part. You so thoroughly don't understand conservation of momentum that when you presented this whole bit to me, it was supposed to have something to do with the Coriolis effect. But like I said, this basic fact of physics has nothing to do with the atmosphere. The boat and the bullet and lighthouse are all moving around the Earth together, and the bullet will continue with the same momentum that the boat has once it leaves the gun. Again, super easy to prove. Get back on that moving truck. This time, bring a friend and pass a ball back and forth. You will observe that the ball does not fly off the back of the truck when it leaves your hands.
Okay, guys.
Oh man, why they don't throw the ball like 5 meters on the air and see what happened with the ball? Because you know what I mean. They don't. When they try to do these comparisons, they don't give the enough time to lose the inertia.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not only that, we're talking about angular momentum, first of all right? And, we've all seen the experiments where, I think you've all seen the little experiment where they'll have like a car and it'll pop up a ball as it's moving, and then it'll move across like 4 or 5 feet and it will catch the ball, right? Well, that's kind of what he's trying to say. In other words, what he is saying is that Coriolis does not affect for ballistic objects, right? That's exactly what he is saying, which is so preposterous. I don't even know what to say. So like I said, go ahead, Jared.
I was just saying, you run out of things to say about it because it calls into question the Coriolis force in general, period. I mean, if you're going to say that, then, and this is the thing that they do, they'll always jump back and forth depending on the argument. In this case, now he's going to say that no, the atmosphere moves perfectly with it, that the angular momentum carries everything with it, and it's just nonsense.
Well, I would say that I kind of agree with the doctor on this one, and hear me out a minute. If you were, say, firing from a, I know, right? If you were firing this projectile from a far away latitude line, then the only like acceleration of the target would be the respective acceleration from the equator to your latitude that you're firing from. But if you're talking about a couple miles, so the equator is spinning allegedly 1,037.5 miles an hour, and where you're firing from would be 1,037.25. So it's not going to be that drastic of a difference. And I think that I agree. Now, there's big problems with the Coriolis force, but on this point, I think I agree with him.
All right. Well, great. Now let's go over that. So when we are presented then with the Coriolis force, I've used this graphic before when we were debunking the PBS thing, but essentially the Coriolis, it requires 2 separate frames of reference, right? And his first mistake is that he's keeping everything in a single frame of reference. Now, I'm not saying that the Coriolis force is real, because it certainly isn't, because we're not on a spinning ball. But, in this example, obviously you've got the frame of reference going around, and then you have the frame of reference from the ball, which when they throw it across, it goes to the person on the right instead of straight across. Now, this is a very typical example of what they give us. They also show us ballistically that when you fire a bullet, and if you're firing it north or south, it will veer off to one side or the other, exactly like what we're seeing here, right? Now, if we look at another write-up on this, they talk about, the Coriolis effect. They say that, well, it's not really a big factor until you get over 1,000 yards. Then it starts becoming something they say you have to compensate for. This is in, mainstream physics that they're talking about this. But, the example that was used was a battleship that's firing not 1,000 feet, but 25 miles, right? So to think that it's going to stay within the exact same frame of reference is, in their model, patently absurd. Now, we all know that it's going to hit the target because the target isn't moving, and there is no such thing as this Coriolis effect, happening as they are describing it to us. So I've got a couple other visualizations which I think are kind of cool, and this is kind of a good example of it, right? Firing the bullets, and it fires off to one side. And now he talks about a frame of reference. So now we're going to switch the frame of reference, right? And see what it looks like from the cannon's point of view. So we have the 2 different scenarios, but the bottom line is according to the heliocentric model, the bullet is going to take, or the projectile is going to take, an apparent path change, and it's not going to hit the target. Now, like I said, as flat earthers, we all know that's BS, and it's always going to hit the target. But, what do you say? So we've also got, more videos here. And
so
we
does
can
he another on a rotating.
Go ahead, Jaron.
I was just going to ask, does he not believe then in the Foucault's pendulum?
I don't know. He didn't cover that part of it, but he did cover a whole lot of other stuff that was just unbelievably ridiculous. But again,
the Foucault pendulum would be minor changes over a long period of time, and so for this example, it would be minor, I think, if assuming that the Earth is a spinning ball, which is of course ridiculous.
But it's a 90-second flight time, John. 90 seconds.
Right, and of course, they use the argument for snipers for a 1,000-yard shot, and it's actually, they say that the Coriolis force causes bullets to go to the right no matter which direction they fire in the northern hemisphere, which is just crazy. Now, here's where I disagree. This is where I think we should see the evidence of the spinning ball Earth, if it were. That would be the altitude of the projectile, because everything is supposedly going around a rotational axis, which is going to be down according to wherever you start. It's always going to be, you know, east and down, east and down. And so if you fire off a projectile that is no longer connected to the Earth by way of friction and all that stuff, then it should apparently start raising up in altitude the further that it flies. That's
Correct.
where I wildly disagree.
Yeah. Because obviously there's also curvature to contend with, as well as angular motion. Well, there's two types of angular motion. There is the rotation of the Earth, and then there's a curvature that it would have to be dropping over, right? So there's really two problems with that. And of course, neither of them ever occur. You don't have to lead a stationary target. That just doesn't happen. So again, I get where he's coming from too. And in the case, if you're going at a linear speed, I think that will actually work, especially in a lab. But of course, when you get into other, longer distances, then you have the atmosphere, you have wind drag to take into consideration. It's not going to work beyond a certain distance, right? And especially it is invalidated when you're talking about an angular change, an angular acceleration, right? So anyway.
The rotational thing is where it really falls apart, because you've got the whole centrifuge stuff going on, which there's no evidence for anywhere ever. And there should be, in these sorts of situations, especially with very long range shots, you should have that rotation of the Earth becoming obvious underneath the projectile that is no longer connected to that. Like, sure, it'll maintain angular momentum, but it's not going to maintain rotational sort of velocity. That's not how it works.
Right. So anyway, that's just something I wanted to bring. And of course, then when is it that you break into that second, frame of reference? I mean, when is it that the atmosphere, and we've asked this a million times, stops rotating with the Earth? When is it, no longer Velcroed where everything goes along with it, right? It just doesn't fly. So anyway, that's what I wanted to cover for this week on that. And, we'll just do one of these at a time, because his whole video is just chock full of silly rebuttals, especially when it comes to dark matter and how he says they're detecting it and all this. And of course, I made the comment in that particular video that even the mainstream physics are saying, well, remember a couple weeks ago on the show where I was bringing up all the articles about how they're desperately trying to save the dark matter, and even got to the point of, well, you know what? It probably doesn't exist and we don't even need it, right? So, I mean, talk about moving the goalpost constantly all the time. But, he's convinced that the dark matter does exist, and, he's sticking to his guns on that. And because of that, because of his point of view, he says we're all suffering from Dunning-Kruger, and he keeps flashing this retarded video, which is kind of infuriating. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm not going to give him a whole lot more time than that, but I just wanted to bring that up, that, his particular stance on this is against everything that mainstream science is telling us about Coriolis and its effect on projectiles. Straight up against it. There it is. Okay. All right. What else do we have? I think we got that. Now, there are a couple announcements that I wanted to make. And one of them, I wanted to show you guys this because I thought this was astounding. But, and Iro knows about this. I sent this to Iro as soon as I found it. But Unreal Engine
I use it.
You use it. God, this is unbelievable, guys, what they can do. Let me just play a couple minutes of this.
Adaptation. The ability to learn from past experience. The use of knowledge to alter their environment. These virtues defined our creators and drove them to the brink of destruction. But that we cannot exist without them. We must save her. Exists within us. Humanity has always had the potential to recognize its flaws and choose a better way. Can we save humanity? Was bringing her here the right choice?
You have asked how our latest real-time cinematic Rebirth was made, almost not believing that the technology has come to this point where photorealism is possible in real time. But we're here to tell you that finally, photorealism is now not only possible in real time and for games being made right now, but that when you use these cutting-edge real-time tools and assets, it's incredibly easy. What you see is not pre-rendered. This is running in real time on a mainstream gaming computer with a single 1080 Ti. Not only that, this is a fully interactive world. It's completely playable. I'm just going to jump into the game here and have a quick run around the scene. So as you can see, you can fully interact with the physics objects of the scene. Everything has collisions. If I push this little rock off here, it's going to go falling down. The other great thing that we can do is change the lighting. Full dynamic lighting helps us work much faster. We could also make the most of Unreal Engine's volumetric effects. The dynamic lighting really helped us on our short film. It meant that we could iterate very quickly on our shots and adjust things in real time. We never had to stop and wait for renders. Everything could be adjusted right then and there.
Right. So there you have it. An absolute real-time astounding. And Iru, when I sent this to Iru was like, oh yeah, I use this. It's just amazing. So yeah, Iru, any comment on this?
Yeah. First of all, you see so realistic is because it's based on mega scans. That is a new technique that came to the market around, I say 5 years ago, which people start to create, of course, like always, from real photograph, material, shader, things like that. But now we're using like you showing now, the advance of the photometrics techniques to extract the the shape of the object that you take by just a simple photograph without any even scan technology. Of course, if you have scan technology, it's going to be more quickly and realistic. But this is going to be a real problem because you took from the real life scenario, shaders, textures, light behavior, things like that, and you're not going to be able to recognize, if you see on the screen or a virtual reality device, you are not be longer to realize if that it was from a real source or just a real source converted into a computer world.
Yeah. Yep.
This combined with their ability to make up fake humans now will be indistinguishable from reality.
Yeah.
You see the website where they have hundreds of people that don't exist?
We know that one.
Yeah, well, I have a really short video about 2 minutes talking about this Goodbye Uncanny Valley is the title of this technology. If you want to, I can play it. If not,
sure.
It's okay.
Yeah, go ahead and play it.
Okay. Let me just to share the screen. Okay. Let me share it with audio. And you see my PowerPoint document?
Not yet.
Not yet. What strange.
You're a little choppy though. You may be running into a little bit of bandwidth issues because you were a little choppy before.
that's a little strange because I don't have any internet doing nothing. So I'm still not.
Yep, there. Something's coming up. Something's coming up. It's black anyway. Nope.
Okay,
It went back to Chris. Nope. Don't see it. It went away.
What a strange because here I have the red mark. That's supposed to be showing that I'm sharing. Okay, it's okay. I'm going to make a quick. It's give me 15 seconds only.
Yeah, it went black, but we're not seeing anything. So I'm not seeing any image.
Let me just reset the machines. It took me about 15 seconds.
Okay.
I think it is coming through on the live stream because I've got the YouTube stream up and there is video coming from Iru, it seems.
Well, no, that's me. That's my screen share. I haven't switched to Iru yet because he hasn't presented anything. It hasn't gone on. So I guess in the meantime, while he's getting that together, let me bring that up. We all know Effie Mishka, and she wanted me to announce that there is a major Flat Earth meetup, and she runs the really good ones, in Sacramento, California, May 4th at noon. And I understand, Chris, you are going to be there, yes?
Yes. Looking forward to it. Should be fun.
Excellent. Yeah. So if you guys get out there, if you haven't met Mishka, get out there and meet her. It's going to be a fairly large one, of course, right in the center of the state. So a lot of people from California, I'm sure, maybe even be able to make it. Maybe even Jaron will make it. Who knows?
I will be there.
Awesome. So there you go.
Yeah, come out and say hi. It'll be at McKinley Park, and I'll have a video on my channel in the coming week or so to kind of highlight it a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to do the same thing. I thought it was a little bit early though to show it because people forget about it if I mirrored it today.
That's why I'm holding back a little bit. I know Mark Sargent already put one out, but I'll wait till we get a little closer to the event and then see people there on Saturday.
Yep, beautiful. And we're still not seeing anything from. Oh, it looks like he dropped out. So I guess he's going to drop out and come in. He probably had to restart everything. So that's cool. All right. So let's go ahead. And so we've got that out of the way. And while we're waiting for Iru, I don't know if you guys have seen this yet, but this is pathetic. I know Dave's seen it, but actually it's only 55 seconds. Let me just go ahead and play it. This is just.
Yeah, Bob, you don't have it on the screen.
I don't.
Nope. Nothing sharing to our side here.
All right. Let me see. Share screen. There's that. Start sharing. Now do you see it?
Yep.
Got it.
Okay, cool. Here we go. So I think it's really appropriate that they show the kids modeling this, right? Because their animations are about that level.
They're making it out of paper mache and curtain rods.
Right. There you go. I think that's a lot more realistic than NASA. But of course, the other thing here is remember that the moon is rotating at about 10 miles an hour, right? And of course, it's just sitting down. I wonder if they're going to remember that when they set it down, that they've got to compensate for that moon rotating at about I think 8 to 10 miles per hour is actually what it's doing. It'd be kind of like trying to jump onto a treadmill and watch somebody face plant. It's pretty funny. So anyway, okay, so where is that? I also had a article write-up on that, which I don't know what I did with it. I may have closed it. Let's see. Going through my tabs here. And I just don't see it. Okay, well, I guess I closed it. But anyway, you guys are aware that I think in 5 days or something like that, Israel is supposed to touch down on the moon, and I can only imagine what a fiasco that's going to be. Any comments on it?
It'll be
They're
fake.
touching down on the 11th, and the pictures that they've released, aren't they orbiting it now?
supposedly.
Supposedly, yeah. The pictures.
That was my joke that Crrow didn't get. Like, you really needed to put that in a photo editor to see that it was completely a joke. I'm speechless. And then, isn't India landing on the moon right after them?
Yeah, there's like this big race to get to the moon, and
so it's telling in itself. Think about this. We haven't been back to the moon in 50 years. Now there's 2 countries landing on the moon, and the mainstream media is 100% ignoring it. The only people that are seeing this, in these articles that we're finding, are people like us that are looking for it, or other NASA superfans.
Yeah.
But I don't think the mainstream media is covering it all, although I don't watch the mainstream media. But nobody outside of, in the normal zombie land even knows of this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and here's the article that was in The Guardian. And I almost felt like telling them, Ira says, hey guys, I have an internet connection problem. So that may be it for Ira. But anyway, so yeah, here it is. And of course, it took about 5 seconds for somebody to drop this into Photoshop and see that it's got the big square box around it. It's just utterly fake. What else do you say? It's so ridiculous. And people will sit there and defend it and defend it and defend it. I wish I had it, one of the videos up where they had actually done this.
Who's defending that picture?
Anybody that believes in the ballers or the moon landings or space, all the NASA fanboys, the general guys. And speaking of which, also last week's Paul on the Plane show, which he has on his channel, where he has a guy that is the editor of what's the name of that? Nexus magazine, along with Scott Henderson, and they absolutely rip the Apollo. Well, again, the Apollo moon landing's a new one, and they absolutely devastate it. So it's just phenomenal. How it keeps getting ripped apart, and people just keep buying it left and right. What do you do? So anyway, that's all I have, guys. So I guess if Iro is having problems, then I will go ahead and we'll close down the show. But before we do that, I'm going to go around one more time and see if anybody has anything that they want to talk about. It looks like he's going to be an hour. All right, Iro, sorry about that. So Chris, any last words on what you want to say? You want to talk about what you're going to be doing with the solar scopes and anything you have upcoming that you want to tell us about?
Sure. Yeah, me and Crrow are going to continue to try and work together and come up with more evidence and try and pin down, hopefully, what this is. And if there's any differences between the angular differences between the sun that we don't see compared to the sun that we do see. And then Monday evening, we're recording a podcast for the next podcast coming up on this.
All right, beautiful. And also, I want to remind everybody that on, is it May? Yeah, May 18th and 19th, we will be doing FE Core's Force the Level experiment here in Denver, up off of Tower Road and what's the crossroad? About 60th or 70th, something like that, Chris?
It starts at 104th and goes to 86th, I believe.
104th to 136th, okay.
86th.
Wow. Oh, 86th, okay.
There by the landfill. I think that's 86, or it could, no, it's 96th Street, from 104th to 96th Street.
Okay, so 96th Avenue to 104th Avenue off of Tower Road, May 18th and 19th. We will be out there running that experiment. We certainly want everybody to come out and join us and photograph it, criticize, offer suggestion, whatever you want to do. We especially want ball earthers there. Keep us honest. You got to keep us honest and stay right on top of us, and so you can bear witness to what we're actually doing. So, and Chris will be spearheading that, and we'll also have, I believe, at least one other surveyor there, and we're trying to work on another one, from what I understand. So that'll be pretty cool.
Yes.
All right, cool. And so next up, David, we will kick it over to you. And what do you have coming up in the near future?
Anybody that wants to see what's wrong with the education system should listen to the latest episode of the Flat Earth podcast. And we had a teacher on for a few minutes, an educator. And Bob, what was your impression?
Oh, wow. I thought he was trolling from the get-go. In fact, I thought at first that it was Fight the Flat Earth. But then I went back and listened to Fight the Flat Earth, and he's got more of a British accent. But, I mean, he's got the same type of attitude and demeanor.
Somebody pointed out that he probably is trolling because he must be listening to Nathan Oakley because he was using a lot of that type of argument. But
yes,
it was super annoying. I think it was interesting, but check it out, the Flat Earth podcast. It's on YouTube. It's on SoundCloud, iTunes. Everybody knows I have the Flat Earth Sun, Moon, and Zodiac Clock app. Check that out. And what most people don't know, and I'm not supposed to talk about it, is I am the brains behind the Crrow 777 radio podcast, which is a must listen. So if you're not subscribed there, check it in. and it's as you say, Bob, if not the best, or maybe Jaron said that, the best podcast, information, truth-seeking podcast out there of its type.
Yeah, it really is.
Anyone knows any better one, I would love to hear about it.
Yeah.
Yep, me too. So, okay, cool. Well, we will have all your stuff and for the apps and all that in the show links if anybody's interested. And we'll get all that in there. So next up, John the Morgal. John, what you got coming up this week?
Yeah, I've got a couple videos I'm working on. I should have section 3 of Lily's going off. Section 3 of Flat Earth Awakening documentary series out in the next few days or weeks. So be on the lookout for that. And man, what an awesome show tonight, you guys. So many wonderful, awesome people this evening.
Yep, I agree. Super. Well, that's great to hear, John. And we will look forward to seeing what you got coming up this week then. We're looking for it. And last but certainly not least, Jaron from Jaronism. What do you got coming up, Jaron?
Same old stuff. Just thanks everybody for watching. As always, all of us, greatly appreciated. Thank you, mods. Thank you guys in the chat. And just check out Jaronism Raw, which is now only on TFR at tfrlive.com. That'll be tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Pacific. And we have D Marble joining us, so it should be fun.
Oh, awesome. That'll be cool. I liked Earl a lot. He's a good guy.
Yeah, me too. I've been watching some of his, street activism recently and really liked it. And so he wanted to talk about it. So it should be good to have him on.
Excellent. All right. And as for me, well, pretty much same old, working, living the dream, all that fun stuff. I have reapplied for Globebusters monetization. However, I don't think it's going to happen because YouTube really doesn't like us too much. So, but we'll see what happens. If not, so what? We're still going to continue doing it. Because really the small amount of money that we do get off it, it's nice, but it doesn't really amount to a whole lot. So, and really getting the truth out there is of much higher priority and concern to me personally. And I'm pretty sure it is to everybody on the panel as well. That's why we do this. That's why we've done it for the last 4 years. So we will keep plugging it. Oh, hey, Arrow, you're back. All right, cool. Yeah, well, we were just closing out the show, so why don't you tell anybody what you've got going on coming up over the next whenever?
I have, I maybe mentioned a few weeks ago, but we are going to release on public television a set of, I don't say a documentary, but it's going to be like a really deeply interview with 3 flat earthers from Argentina, and it's going to be on public television, so it's going to have a huge impact. I believe that. In fact, this time I guarantee that the only condition that I put on the producers was that I'm going to edit the content, the material inside the interviews. So the interview was filmed by a private company, and I editing the images. So it's gonna be like a respectable material on television. So we are waiting for that because, like you mentioned at the beginning of the show, with the conference here in Argentina that we made the last month. it becomes a really hot topic. And I believe this set of interview that is going to come on public television is right in the spot, in terms of the time for the people start waking up. So that is the more important thing that I have. And of course, I get back to my channels because the last 3 weeks I was with my girlfriend, and she lives in Switzerland, so she comes here to visit me, and I was busy with that. So right now I'm starting to finish some videos and upload into my Nur for Everyone and Nur para Todos, the Spanish version.
Excellent. And don't forget her, we don't mind if you do your broadcast from the shower if you are running short on time.
No, but I must be confessed something. For doing that kind of thing, my cell phone get to the trash for the vapor in the bath. So I don't think I'm gonna make it again.
Okay. I was wondering how you did that, by the way. So apparently it was deleterious to your cell phone. So don't do that anymore.
No.
All right. Beautiful. Okay, guys. Well, that's a wrap then. We will catch you next week. And again, thanks mods and everybody for joining us. Thanks everybody that listens to Globebusters on a regular basis. We appreciate you. Love everybody. And we'll see you next week. So until then, be good to each other. Don't lie to each other. Open your mind because there's truth inside. Peace out, everybody.
Peace.
Peace.